Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our December 18th, 2024 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 p.m. business meeting. We do have two items on our regular agenda that I think have a fair number of people that would like to speak on. Both of those have sign-up sheets at the front of the room, so if you'd take a minute, if you would like to give public comment when those two regular agenda items come up, if you'd please sign in with your name and we'll get you in that order. For all else, there are paper copies of the agenda by the front door, if anyone wants those, and the full packet is available on our website. This evening, we do have a consent agenda. We'll follow that with general public comment, and then we have two regular agenda items. For our consent agenda, we will offer to pull any items to the County Commission. If anyone wants to pull one of those items from consent for further discussion, we will also offer that to the public. Given our limited time and need to have orderly and efficient meeting, for general public comment, we will apply certain rules to public comments, and those will also apply to our agenda item of public comment also. So, and those are that each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. Individuals may not donate unused time to other speakers, and comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. We also maintain the decorum of our meeting by prohibiting public comments that are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent, fighting words, slander, or speech that invades the privacy of individuals, unreasonably loud, disruptive, or repetitive, or that interrupt or substantially interfere with the board's ability to conduct county business. We do reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who violates these public comment rules. At that time, we'd ask for your full name and address, which we'll hopefully also have on the sheet, and to address your comments up to us. Please know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but that we value the input. We don't generally respond to general public comments on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we'll try and get specific questions answered. After that, we'll have our regular agenda, and also for each of those action items, we will hear from staff or an applicant, followed by questions from the Commission, and then open that item up for public comment relevant to that item. Once public comment is closed, we bring the item back to the Commission for further discussion and a vote. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. Commissioners, that brings us to our consent agenda. Do you have anything you would like to pull from the consent agenda for further discussion? I do have one minor correction that we've worked through with staff for item 1.3, so we will pull that for that correction. Is there any member of the public who would like to pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Which item would you like to pull? 1.8. Sarah, do we have anyone online who would like to pull a consent agenda item? Okay. With that, Commissioners, I would entertain a motion for the balance of consent.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Second.
Actually, 1.3 is one that I asked to pull.
And remove 1.3. I'll amend my motion.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Motion passes. For item 1.3, it's just a small correction within the Commission Order 24-120 for the tax roll adjustments, and that is for item number P380724, the 2024 valuation to be written as $19,700. And so what we would be interested in, open this up, so we'll also take public comment on it, would be to approve the rest of that motion with that minor change. So Commissioners, do you have any questions or thoughts on that before I go to public comment? Go. Okay, I have opened this item, so it becomes a public comment item. Is there anyone who would like to speak on the tax roll adjustments? And seeing none, Sarah, do we have anyone online for that? If it's all right, I'll go ahead and make that motion so that we get that correction there. I move to approve Commission Order 24-120 tax roll adjustments with the change of the valuation to the 2024 valuation to read as $19,700 for reference number P380724.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that. Item 1.8, this is an administration item with Artists Helping the Homeless. And Commissioners, do you have any initial questions, or staff, do you have any initial comments before we open this for public comment?
No questions for me.
Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to give public comment on consent agenda item 1.8?
Okay, the reason I asked to pull this has nothing to do with Carwoo and the work of his guys. I know that they do a lot of work with reentry from the jail and such like that. And my questions revolve around the accountability and the money that we're spending. We've been told by the city repeatedly after they've dumped millions into a program that we're going to have a dashboard available that's going to be able to show us the progress and the things that we're achieving with the money that we're spending. We're not seeing those things. When we're funding these things, Douglas County, in case everybody in the room doesn't know, Douglas County has access. They're a part of the Kansas Homeless Coalition. And what that does is that gives them access to be able to get licensing for access to the HMIS system. The database is actually called Clarity. But we're not seeing the reporting that should be being reported from HMIS through the city. And before we continue to spend money on these things where we're trying to impact homeless outreach efforts, trying to impact homeless solutions, you know, I'll say again that you guys need to take a lesson from District 2 Judge Sally Picorni when she says you need to take a housing first approach. And she says that in the drug court hearings. Go ask her about it. That's all I can say on that. But the county has the access to get these licenses to hook people up with the HMIS access so that they can start tracking the data. My question is, when you give Carwoo these funds, are we going to be expecting some data to be tracked? Because I can tell you that as an advocate myself, that I do the propane program, I track that because it's dollars. But I don't track my hours. I don't track the people that I contact, and it's a difficult process to do. And that's why a lot of people rely on these local funding ability that you guys have through our tax dollars, is because HUD, when they go for that government money, HUD requires this reporting. HUD requires quantification of the results. So if they're not getting HUD money and we're going to fund it, why can't we expect some of the same quantification of the results and the expectations of the programs that you're going to be funding? That's the reality of these things. Again, not critical about Carwoo or anything. This is about the taxpayers' money being quantified, because we're not seeing the results on the street that we were promised by the city. I don't think anybody in this room can say those results have happened. And I find it shameful that the city would call BNSF heartless when they're going to sweep a camp that's right next to where their homeless people hang out. Their homeless people occupy the Amtrak station, so they sweep the Amtrak camp to get all those homeless people away from where they're stationed. These are the kind of dumb decisions we're making. We need to quantify the expectations of the program and the results that happen as a result of it.
Is there anyone else who'd like to give public comment on consent agenda item 1.8? Seeing nobody else in the room, Sarah, do we have anyone online? Okay, with that, closing public comment and bring it back to the commission.
Sarah, just a quick question. We do have community partner agreements that do require data collection with Artists Helping the Homeless. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we work with them to determine what those metrics are like with any community partner. We determine those metrics and they provide information at our meetings about their results of the spending of those dollars. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thanks.
Follow-up question. The data dashboard has been on the cusp of being released. Do we have a status update on that?
Jill Joliker is available online. If you have any information you can add.
Commissioners, we've been having extensive conversations with the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition, who is the collaborative applicant or the administrator of the Balance of State Continuum of Care, which also oversees the HMIS system and was responsible for assisting us in developing that real-time data dashboard. The delay in developing that dashboard continues to be something that we are having really direct conversations with the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition. We're making progress, and I hope that we have that done here soon. But at the end of the day, that is a job that we have tasked to and is in the lane of the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition. I will say, though, that we have worked very hard with all of our partners in the region to make sure that everyone that should have access to Clarity or the HMIS system has it. is properly trained and is inputting the data accordingly. How that data is transmitted and shared out to the larger community it continues to be a challenge, but I do know that the data is being reported and we're doing our best to be able to make sure that everybody's using it the way they should. And I'll make sure that we're trying to get an update to the commission on that dashboard as soon as possible.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate that. I know there's been a lot of progress made in terms of getting partners on board with the HMIS so that when we do have that dashboard rollout, I believe it will be fairly complete in terms of the partners for city and county funding. Would that be right? Sorry, Jill, I kind of.
No, I'm
phrased that
sorry.
as a question at the end.
No, you're right. You are correct.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, anything else? I would entertain a motion on the service agreement for Artists Helping the Homeless.
This is Commissioner Reed. I move to authorize the addition of $36,000 in ongoing funding for Artists Helping the Homeless for a total fiscal year 2025 budget of $448,686.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Passes. This brings us to general public comment. This is a time for items that are not on our regular agenda. If you've come to speak on either the agrivoltaic plan or the stormwater study, those are on our regular agenda. And I would ask you to please sign up. There's 2 sign-up sheets at the front of the room if you want to speak when that time does come. But at this point, we're taking general public comment for items that are not on our regular agenda. Is there anyone who would like to give general public comment? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Cameron Sipe. I'm the director of the Labor Management Trust for the Laborers Union, and I represent contractors that hire and employ our local citizens, our builders of our community. These projects I'd like to just share for the
Cameron, can you hold that microphone up to your, we won't hear you. We want everybody to be able to hear you.
This is my suffering. If
That's
this is what I have to
great.
deal with, I'll be all right.
And if you can repeat your last name, I didn't catch it.
Sure, SIPE, S-E-I-P. I'm thankful to serve as the director for the Labor Management Trust for the contractors that employ people that live here. We have good paying wages, benefits that take care of families, and we are the builders of the community. A job like the solar farm that's going to be coming is hundreds of millions of dollars that are being spent. And in the IRA, there is a tax incentive that is written so that if a contractor participates in apprenticeship, then it would receive a tax benefit that would be passed on to the energy company that would ultimately buy it. What we are seeing is we're seeing apprenticeships pop up out of the woodwork that are in the guise of apprenticeship, but what they are labor-ready services. There are people that are being brought from out of town, being paid apprentice wages with no longevity or opportunity for future career employment. When apprenticeship and mentorship is the oldest form of education that we have, and if you don't monitor how it's being taken care of, instead if it's being taken advantage of in order for thicker profit margins, in order for things that don't actually care for the people of the community, then I would like to just share that I don't think that's fair. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent. That's great. We need green energy. We need renewable energy. I think that's wonderful. And I think this part of Kansas is welcome to it. I think there are very specific things that are problematic about this job. I think that you've heard a lot of them, and I think that you will continue to hear more about them. And I would just ask that opportunity for actually pulling those things apart to make sure that this project is very good for the community is your duty and an honor that you get to do. So I would appreciate the fact that if you can hear my words and understand that I'm here because apprenticeship is what gave me my opportunity, being able to show up. Thank you. I'll just wrap up with this real quick. The solar farm has things about it that it's not because it's solar. It's not because it's renewable energy. It's because of the location, the fact that it doesn't offer local employment. It won't employ the people of this community. And there are ways that the people who govern us, who are elected, can pass laws that will guide future people.
Thank you so much. Come on up.
Karen,
This is general public comment, right? I want to make sure everybody can hear this one, right? I want to make sure to point out exactly what just happened. And sir, I appreciate your comments. This isn't about you at all. But Karen, your prejudice just showed through once again. Your bias just showed through once again. What did that man speak to, Patrick? What item on the agenda did he just speak to? Come on. Everybody look at your agendas and let's see what item he spoke to. Come on, I want everybody in the room to look at your agenda and see what item he spoke to. That was item 3.1 there, Karen. How come you didn't shut him down and throw him out of the room and tell him he couldn't talk about that during general public comment? Guess that's another one of those inconsistencies you and Linus will need to be discussing probably. Boy, you stepped in it, didn't you? How much time do I got over there left, timekeeper? $41,000 timekeeper over there. Time, please. Time, please. Really? See, that's the bias, guys. That's the bias. We can let anybody talk about 3.1. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about 3.1. You know, we got a same solar situation going on up in Jackson County where some people are getting paid off. How much money did you get, Karen? And I'm going to be revisiting this again after 3.1 when we open it up again there, because we get to talk about shit twice tonight, you know. How much money did you get? People are looking into the money you got paid, you know. You corrupt politician. People are looking into it. I came here to talk about homelessness. You created this conversation. I would have been gone after general public comment tonight. You created this one. I'll be here for the comment at the end of 3.1. And I had something else to do. I had another appointment to meet, but I'm going to stay for this one. You know? I'm going to stay. Your bias. And tonight you put it on display for a full room. The room is full right now, Karen. And it's real easy to go back into the videos and see everything that happened. You realize that? How much money did you get paid, Karen? You can have your 30 seconds. I'll be back. Pathetic. Shameful.
For the record, I find labor contracts to be on none of the regular agenda items that we have before us today. Is there anyone else who'd like to give general public comment?
Well, it's 2 for 1 night here then, because all the people that are here to talk about solar can come up and talk about it right now, because you allowed it with one speaker and then you allowed it with Michael there as well. So anybody here to talk about it during the agenda item can come up and talk about it now and then talk about it afterwards as well. They'll 2 for 1. You could even repeat what you said twice here. You come and say it right now and then say it again later. If you guys really wanted to let your voices be heard, you come up and get 6 minutes instead of 3. Because I think that's what's called a violation of your own rule, because you said that that wouldn't be allowed. Like, general public comment is specifically for comments that aren't on the agenda. So by allowing that, you've now officially disrupted your own meeting, because that wasn't supposed to be allowed. So I got a sign here that says, speaking of violating your rules there, Sarah, can you loan me $5? And so you've stopped me a couple of times from speaking in here when I asked Sarah some questions there, in particular with her raise. She got a $41,000 raise 2 weeks ago, and so I was asking her some to justify that, and you stopped me. But prior to that, you had allowed Michael there to address her as well. So my question is, why do you allow this sign here? So this sign during general public comment is expressing out loud what I was, or is expressing silently what I was saying out loud. Sarah, can you loan me $5? Sarah, are you gonna get a new car with that $41,000 raise? Not stopping me this time, Karen. See, this is, yeah, those inconsistencies. This is stuff that'll chill speech. This is stuff that you don't really know as a speaker what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow, because it's applied in a discriminatory fashion against me. So I come in, I don't know if you're going to allow a sign here today or not allow a sign. And now the public doesn't know if you're gonna be allowed to speak on an agenda item during general public comment. So it's kind of just like whatever happens. Sometimes you catch the error, sometimes you don't. But you have a lot of errors in the way you run your meetings, a lot of inconsistencies. And I never get any answers for it. These are legitimate questions. Why are you allowing this sign that doesn't address you guys? It specifically addresses Sarah there. And as a matter of fact, listening to your rules here, I don't even think that's a rule that says we have to address you guys. I don't even think you read that as a rule. So again, like when I'm speaking up here and you stop me, you are creating a disruption in the meeting because this is my 3 minutes. This is 3 minutes, it's for me. And then when you stop it, you're disrupting the meeting. And it's so funny because you've had me arrested for supposedly disrupting a meeting, but yet you do it and it's no problem whatsoever. Can we get the cops over here? Can we get, hey, Flory, can we get you to arrest her here? She's disrupting the meeting.
Is there anyone else who'd like to give general public comment? This is a time for items that are not on our regular agenda. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to give general public comment? Okay. Is there anyone online? Okay, with that closing general public comment and beginning our regular agenda, and this is a planning item. We have Mary Miller, and this is the agrivoltaic and vegetation management plan. And Mary, do you have a presentation to start with?
I have a short presentation. Get this up here, I need to share. Sorry. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Mary Miller, City County Planner, and I am going to introduce this item, the Vegetation Management and Agrivoltaics Plan. I'll give a brief introduction, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant, and they can explain the details of the plan. And we also have the county staff that worked with the applicant to develop the plan, so if you have questions for them, they're available today as well. This CUP was approved by the County Commission on April 13th of this year, subject to conditions of approval. There were also conditions and restrictions of use, but we're looking at the conditions of approval with this. And at condition E noted that the operator shall revise the vegetation management and agrivoltaic plan to outline the various potential phases of agrivoltaics and provide more detailed information on the agrivoltaic activities being proposed. And then that condition required the plan to come back to you. So that's where we are today. This is not the last time you'll see the agrivoltaic plan. It will come back to you. And this was also included in the CUP conditions that they would need to provide a detailed agrivoltaic report 12 to 24 months after the release of the certificate of completion. And this is kind of a different type of certificate. When you build a building, you get a certificate of occupancy. That means everything's done, permits have been obtained, inspections have occurred, all necessary regulations have been met, and the building can be occupied. With this solar farm, it'll be a certificate of completion, which means the same. Everything is done, inspections have been completed, they have all the necessary permits, and the use can commence. So from that point on, for 12 to 24 months, they would need to provide a revised or a new agrivoltaic report. And this would be detailed. And they would also have to provide one with every 5-year conditional use permit review. There's a review every 5 years to make sure they're compliant with the conditions and restrictions of use. And at that time, the Zoning and Codes Director will provide you with a summary of the report, and it will note the progress that has been made, any challenges that have been ran into, and will set goals for the next report. And so this will be ongoing throughout the life of the conditional use permit. So the agrivoltaic and vegetation management plan is a plan for a process. So in it, you didn't find specific information such as how many acres of certain crops would be planted, what type of fencing would be used, where livestock would be kept. That's all to be determined later. And as I go through kind of the basic steps, the process is established so that can be determined at a later time, and that will be included in the reports that come back to you. So just with this introduction, I want to kind of mention some of the changes that in the conditions. We're recommending some minor changes. And you'll notice that in the packet, there were 4 attachments. And attachment D, they contain those minor changes. Attachment C was the plan that was provided at the April meeting. And attachment B was the revised plan in full. Attachment A was the new plan, and it was just highlighted to give you an idea of where new information had been added. And so I'm going to go through some of that new information. They did provide the additional information on herbicides that you requested. That's got an asterisk because there is a slight error. There's like a double negative in a statement that makes it appear like herbicides would not be applied during the non-blooming season. And so that'll just be cleared up to make it clear that that is when they would be applied. But that's a very minor change. So they did provide a mowing schedule. And then there's a section about the agrivoltaic phases. There's 3 phases, and in the memo, I kind of provide a chart of those because they're not your typical phases. A lot of times you think it's phase 1, it stops, phase 2, it stops, but these somehow, they run concurrently. Phase 1 is the original one where they're going to establish pollinator vegetation. Most of that's going to happen in the first few years, but it'll continue throughout the life of the CUP as vegetation dies or areas just become bare. They'll have to revegetate. The second one is vegetation management. That'll happen throughout the whole life of the CUP. Vegetation management might occur through herbicides, mowing. It could occur through grazing. And then we have the agrivoltaic program. And that'll occur concurrently with the vegetation management. Some of the vegetation management would be considered agrivoltaics. If you're planting pollinator, that's cover crop. That's kind of a passive agrivoltaics. If you have grazing of sheep, that's agrivoltaics, as long as it's within the fenced area. And then there'll be other items. So it goes into a lot of work explaining the agrivoltaic program. And the 2 principal factors of that, one is a grant. The operator would have set up a $250,000 grant, and that's what would be used to work with farmers that want to be involved in agrivoltaics. That's got an asterisk just to clarify when that would begin. In the plan, it notes it'll begin at the end of phase 1. And I think the applicant's intent was to make it at the end of the busy time of phase 1 when vegetation is established, because phase 1 technically runs through the whole CUP. And so that'll be clarified in the conditions when they make that change. And so the agrivoltaics board is probably a major component of the revised plan. This board will consist of several parties. It'll include the operator. They intend to collaborate with TNC, the Nature Conservancy, as their expert advice. And also there will be a representative from the county on the board, and then they'll include other people as they determine. The county representative will be able to make reports back to the county if you're interested in what the progress is or what's been happening. And so that's kind of the basic outline of some of the changes that have been made. But I wanted to clarify that in the conditions, when I note, that we recommend you approve it, subject to the condition that those minor changes be made, those are the changes we're asking for. And also a definition of a few terms that refer to the project area or the project site, just to clarify exactly what is meant by that to avoid any confusion. And these changes would not require, they would not have to come back to you for approval. They would just be made. And so that is the kind of the brief introduction, and I'll turn it over to Savion or Evergy, whoever is going to provide the information on the plan. Okay.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ashton Martin, Senior Permitting and Environmental Manager for Savion. As Mary mentioned, the CUP application that you approved on April 13th, 2024 included a condition that we provide you with a revised vegetation management and agrivoltaic plan to outline the various phases of agrivoltaics and provide more detailed information on the agrivoltaic activities being proposed. If you compare the revised vegetation management plan with the materials previously submitted, you will see that we've been very consistent in our approach to agrivoltaics planning. The revised plan is an updated version of the original plan dated August 17th, 2023. The grazing management plan, which is Appendix E, is the same plan that was submitted in the fall of 2023. We first described to you the 3 proposed phases of the agrivoltaics development in a summary dated April 9th, 2024. The revised plan consolidates and integrates all of this information into one document. It's exciting to think about what agrivoltaic uses might actually occur at the project and when and where. The revised plan is intended to be a foundational document that establishes the process and structure for the actual implementation of agrivoltaics. It's helpful to remember that this is only the first of many agrivoltaic plans and reports that the CUP conditions require, as Mary mentioned. For example, there will be a plan update 12 to 24 months from the release of the certificate of completion and additional 5-year reviews during the life of the CUP. And I apologize for repeating what Mary just said. We appreciate the input and feedback that we've received from staff over the course of the last 8 months and believe that the updated plan merits your approval. I believe the revised plan speaks for itself, but I'm pleased to stand for any questions that you may have. I'm also joined here today by representatives of the Nature Conservancy and Evergy.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have initial questions?
I actually don't have any questions. Specific to the plan, Mary answered them, I thought, pretty thoroughly in the staff memo. I just wanted to circle back to something you mentioned, Mary, the certificate of completion and the certificate of occupancy. I heard you say they're the same, right? Meaning there's no meaningful distinction between the two. It's just about a difference of a different type of land use. Is that accurate?
Yeah, with certificate of occupancy, someone's going to actually occupy a structure and where there's going to be no occupation on the solar farm. So they call it a certificate of completion, but it's basically the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Question for Ashton. So with this grant program, tell me how you're getting possible applicants. What's the process? Have you figured that out yet?
There would be an advisory board formed during phase 3, which is beginning somewhere around the time of start of construction. That would include, as it's proposed now, the Nature Conservancy along with Evergy and members of the public, as Mary alluded to. That advisory board would prepare an RFP for that grant application under the direction of that board.
And we've put out RFPs before and not got any responses. What would be your response if you didn't get any?
I think then it would probably make sense for the advisory board to revisit the approach to communicating that to the public and stakeholders, identifying various organizations within the community that could better identify those potential applicants.
Thank you.
Ashton, you can stay up for a minute. The $250,000, that is specifically available for granting to operators or research projects or something like that. Is that right? That $250,000 is all to be part of that RFP process?
To be awarded to the applicants, not for any sort of operational funds, if that's what you mean.
I guess what I'm asking is, what about infrastructure? So like, water lines, are those going to be provided in the site plan, or are those something that needs to be paid for out of that $250,000, or would an applicant be required to cover the cost of those?
I don't know if I can really speak to that. I think it's on a case-by-case basis in what we're describing, drip irrigation versus gates versus loading paddocks. Each circumstance is a little bit unique in how it would be funded, I suppose. I know that there are state funds and federal funds that are available where the agrivoltaic fund proposed in this project could be used as match funding for obtaining those funds for infrastructure.
You mentioned also in there a goal of having 3 operators or 3 grants given in the first 12 months. The first 12 months of what? Of the beginning of phase 2, of when the RFP is put out? What is that 12-month timeframe?
I don't want to speak and give you the wrong answer, but My understanding is that that would be within 12 months of the formation of the advisory board.
Thank you. Mary, you mentioned that there were a number of staff members. Can you just mention who from county staff was involved in the conversation and what their roles are?
Yes, Tanya Voigt, the Director of Zoning and Codes, and Kim Kreiner Ritchie, she's the Director of Sustainability. I may not have her exactly right, but they worked with the applicant and the operator in developing the plan.
Thank you. Commissioners, other questions before we go to public comment? Okay, I will just reiterate that the conditional use permit itself was passed and approved in May after careful consideration of the application. This is not an open question at this time. So the item that's before us at the moment is the agrivoltaic plan. In terms of just the general timeframe of things, oh, thank you, Sarah. The CUP has been approved. The pilot agreement has been approved. The two pieces that we have before us today are the agrivoltaic plan and the stormwater plan. We do not have final agreements yet before us. They're still in process on fees and responsibilities, what we're calling the agreement on agreements, and the road use agreement. So there are two pieces in front of us. These are not the final pieces of this approval for all the conditions. So I just want to make sure that that is well known and understood by the group. Do we have people
We only
signed up?
have one person signed up so far, Natalia Lother.
Okay.
And we ask folks to sign up just so we can get your name spelled right in the minutes. So if you want your name spelled right in the minutes, please go ahead and sign up. It's not required, you're right.
I'll call
but if
Natalia.
you want it spelled right, we'll like to have that. But
I'll call
Natalia's first.
Natalia up. Thank you.
Natalia Lowther, 1480 North 1700 Road. One thing I want to point out is that these plans are part of the conditional use permit, not additional to, and therefore they require a supermajority approval. I want to ask, have you had time to thoroughly read the written public comments that have been submitted? If you did not read all of these comments, you are refusing to consider information from key stakeholders while making decisions that will affect us for decades. Forcing this matter through tonight means that county and applicant are the only ones that have really had an opportunity to weigh in. Did you read the letter from the Cod Drainage District asking for a 60-day extension so that they can hire an engineering firm to review the stormwater study?
And just for the
Did
record,
you review-
Natalia, the stormwater study is our next item. So anything related to
Okay.
agrivoltaics.
Did you
we
read the
can.
letter from Charlie Novogradic about how this would affect his farm? Did you read my letter that included a lot of detail about deep errors and lack of things in the vegetation management plan? I'm asking you to defer this decision for 60 days to allow for more consideration of these very, very important parts of the conditional use permit. Most of the Sky Energy Center site drains into Maple Grove tributary when the pump is overwhelmed. My 28-year-old Pecan Grove floods. Any additional flooding from KSEC will mean that KSEC is using my land as a default stormwater detention pond. That is not acceptable.
Natalia, is that related to the agrivoltaics portion?
Stormwater on my land, yes, pertains to the stormwater management plan. That's where it says that. I'm sorry, this is really confusing. Okay, the vegetation management plan specifies vegetation for the phase one says that all the mesic short vegetation will be mowed whenever it gets to 18 inches. The species that are selected that will not be able to bloom before they reach more than that. They're shown as reaching 24 to 36 inches, but they're going to grow taller than that in these conditions because they do on my farm, which is the same soil and the same water. The vegetation management plan only specifies that RFPs will be issued, and it specifically says that Evergy does not have to approve any proposals out of those.
Natalia,
And so
I'm
they
sorry.
basically
We've come to
don't
our
have
3
to do
minutes.
anything that the vegetation management plan says.
Natalia, I'm
That's
sorry.
agrivoltaics.
Thank you. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on the agrivoltaics item? We do have the stormwater item will come up after that. And sorry, do we have someone signed up? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Next is Jeff Southland and then Michael Almond.
Southard.
Southern?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Southard. I've been a full-time resident of Dallas County for almost 50 years. I'm a fifth-generation Kansan, and while my ancestors were farmers in Rooks County, my experience with agriculture is limited. I do have some experience with solar power, for my church, First Presbyterian, is in the process of placing solar panels on our roof to save energy and money. I have no vested interest in either side of this debate, but I come before you to address an issue which has not been touched on yet, which argues against adopting the agrivoltaics proposal in its current form. As for the packet, I have read through it and found it to be a very complete study by Burns McDonnell, a well-respected engineering firm. It has lovely graphs and maps and charts, lists of things like soils and forbs and whatnot. However, it does not have anything to say about the issue I'm here to raise tonight. Evergy's project is scheduled to last a minimum of 25 years. That's a long time in the utility business. 25 years ago, Evergy did not exist, and there's a good chance it won't exist 25 years from now. There'll also be numerous changes in the makeup of this commission. What assurances does the county have that Evergy will follow through with its promises on agrivoltaics in the future, say in 5 or 10 or 15 years from now? The fact is, you don't. I read through the 136 pages of the proposal, and there is not one word about enforcing the plan in the future. What consequences will there be if Evergy, after a few years, decides that the wonderful dream of agrivoltaics on this site is just that, a wonderful dream, and through neglect or otherwise lets the system fail? Evergy is not in the business of growing grass or raising sheep. It's there to produce and market and sell energy, in this case through solar panels. Everything else is secondary. Who is responsible for oversight, real substantive oversight with teeth in it? What are the penalties for noncompliance? The answer is simple: there are none. The advisory committee briefly mentioned on page 65 of the packet is just that: purely advisory, comprised of volunteers with no county involvement. They have no enforcement powers. Inquiring minds would like to know the answer to these questions before it is too late. In short, the commission today is being asked to approve the project and trust Evergy, or its successor, to do the right thing in the future. Commissioners, given the lack of any substantive enforcement mechanisms, if you approve this plan, you will, to use an agriculture metaphor, be buying a pig and a poke. This you absolutely, positively must not do. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, who do we have as next?
Michael Almond,
Thank you.
and then folks can continue to sign up.
Thank you. Michael Allman. The condition that agrivoltaics be included in the conditional use permit is to allay concerns that our most fertile soils will be taken out of food production. But today's review is just an exercise in futility, because agrivoltaics is neither a requirement nor an enforceable condition. The solar regulations are written so imprecisely that all they require is, quote, perennial vegetated ground cover. Food capability is only an option. No matter how detailed this agrivoltaics plan before you may be, for acreage, planting, phasing, specialty crops or grazing, mowing or herbicides, none of that is enforceable. And we would be deluding ourselves to think that agrivoltaics is field ready in spite of Savion's soothing reassurances. The U.S. Department of Energy calls agrivoltaics, quote, a nascent business model having, quote, questions about costs, worker safety, liability, legal and regulatory issues that need further research before they're being widely used in the solar industry. This agrivoltaics plan doesn't even attempt to predict success by relying on inexact statements such as, quote, it is an anticipated, that herbicide use will decrease, upon establishment of permanent vegetation, Nobody, Evergy to say the least, can guarantee that agrivoltaics will work at an industrial scale. Evergy is an investor-owned utility with fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and a rate structure governed by the Kansas Corporation Commission. They can't allow elevated agrivoltaics costs to weaken their revenue projections. Most likely, Evergy's open-ended agrivoltaics costs will become prohibitive, and they will revert to planting fescue or zoysia or mow and herbicide at will. And the county cannot enforce the agrivoltaics plan by revoking the CUP because the KCC won't allow you to shutter a 159 megawatt power plant, and Southwest Power Pool won't countenance a contract default. Whether you adopt this plan or not, you lacked agency to make it happen. Either way, there will be no agrivoltaics. The only difference is that with approval, we will be stuck for a minimum of 25 years with loss of local food production potential, subject to indefinite extension. This would be an irresponsible disservice to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, who do we have next on our list? I know we've had some folks come in. We're doing a public comment for the agrivoltaics plan. If anyone would like to sign up for that public comment, you're welcome to, right there by Sarah.
Scott Thelman.
Okay, and the following item is, there's also a sign-up sheet for.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Scott Thelman, 25-year Grant Township resident. I'm speaking tonight as a longtime Grant Township resident who's been deeply involved in this whole process. I'm not going to address the detail of the agrivoltaic plan or the stormwater plan, and they are intertwined. How you plant affects how the water runs off. But one plan is 96 pages, another is 130 pages. And both of these are densely packed with a lot of technical data that really only an expert can interpret. And I'm not an expert. I mean, none of you are either. You're taking it on faith that Savion and the planning department personnel are correct in all their assumptions. We know from past meetings, they got it wrong in earlier drafts. Did they get it right this time? Are you sure? The plans were released only 2 weeks ago, so a simple request was made. Give the rest of us more time to evaluate these plans. This was asked by Grant Township, by the Food Policy Council, by the Drainage District, and numerous people and businesses in North Lawrence and Grant Township. Even the newly elected commissioners to be seated next month wanted an opportunity to evaluate these plans and weigh in on them, but you said no. If you go forward and approve these plans tonight without allowing adequate time for review by the very people that are most affected by your decision, I think it's a disservice to the very people that you are supposed to represent. And any miscalculations in these plans will have a significant impact on their lives and property. I'm a surgeon, and I sometimes see patients who come in with very complex problems. They can be overwhelmed by the technical aspects of the information that's being given to them, and I do my best to help them sort it out and make a plan. If the patient asks for more time, I give it to them. I urge them to get a second opinion from another expert, and I'll even arrange for that. It's the right thing to do. I'm an expert at what I do, but I know that another expert might see things differently, and when the decision is important, we need to take our time and make sure everyone's had a chance to weigh in. I'm deeply disappointed by this county commission proceeding with a vote on these proposals. You've been asked by multiple governing bodies, councils, people and businesses to give us more time to have these studies reviewed. We are taxpayers, not engineers, but we are those that will be most impacted by your actions tonight. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Who do we have next on our list?
Nancy Thelman.
Come on up.
I'm Nancy Thelman. I live at 1547 North 2000 Road. I respectfully want to be on the record again as objecting to Commissioner Willie's participation in this meeting, given her extensive conflicts on this CUP as documented in the SOS Caw Valley lawsuit. Commissioner Willie has been a driving force behind this project and with this agrivoltaics plan in particular. From her active role in a non-public ad hoc committee writing the solar regulations that undergird this CUP, to advising this applicant on weaknesses of their application prior to the Planning Commission in December 2023, to helping shape the applicant's revised agrivoltaics plan with 4 specific directives, including execution of new land leases, hiring a third-party manager, forming a collaborative advisory board, and creating a fund to which the applicant can donate to show their commitment. These are all Commissioner Willie's ideas shared with the applicant as a much-needed improvement, she said, to an otherwise weak plan. All 4 of these ideas were adopted by the applicant and are evident in their agrivoltaic plan that is set for a vote tonight. Commissioner Willie materially changed this application while it was actively in process, to the great advantage of the applicant and the great disadvantage of the public, who, knowing her deep involvement with the formation of this project, cannot now expect a fair and unbiased hearing or due process, which is our right, and this is a profound disappointment. Further, with this project, we've witnessed just how fierce an advocate Commissioner Willie is for her regenerative approach to soil health in Douglas County. So fierce an advocate is she, and so clear in her disdain for their work, Commissioner Willie has alienated nearly every farmer in Douglas County, ironically making it less likely, not more likely, that they will adopt the regenerative practices she so dearly wants. Calling a farmer soil dead or unable to support life is not a science-based observation, but a harsh generalization and a profoundly powerful and hurtful criticism that not only cuts at the farmer's practice, but cuts at their heart as well. I doubt it was your intention to draw such a stark line between good farmers or bad, but the message was received regardless, and the damage is done. Maybe there's a desire to fix that going forward, and maybe not, but either way, it's a damn shame. So I believe the county's allowance that Commissioner Willie has a clean, unconflicted vote tonight remains an ethical offense. And I believe tonight, just as strongly as I ever did, that this CUP, this project, and this plan in particular, and the process behind it are seriously flawed and should be rejected.
Thank you. Who do we have next on our list, Sarah?
I mean, the list isn't being
Oh,
monitored.
do we have someone in
Do
line?
have someone that signed up.
Yeah, who?
Check. Scotty Thelman.
Scotty?
Yeah. And then I want to, folks online, if you could raise your hand on Zoom, when we get to that portion, we will go from raised hands.
Commissioners, while the goals of this plan are admirable, the reality is that it is fundamentally incomplete and inadequate. This plan is important. Success of this plan determines the success of the stormwater management plan. This interconnection is a challenge, and they are two sides of the same coin. They depend on each other in order to achieve the desired outcomes of controlling stormwater runoff, preventing nutrient loss, and supporting agrivoltaics. Unfortunately, this plan is missing a critical ingredient: accountability. As you may know, the company that drafted the grazing management plan is no longer in business. There are no enforceable assurances that agrivoltaics will come to fruition as part of the conditions, And without an engaged and responsible party overseeing the implementation, we wonder how we can ensure that this plan will be executed correctly or at all. When vegetation fails to establish, stormwater mismanagement will follow. And when stormwater issues arise, vegetation efforts are undermined. It's a domino effect, and this plan has no hands left to stop the first tile from falling. The promise of agrivoltaic research is exciting, but only if it's supported by a robust and enforceable agrivoltaics condition, along with a stormwater and vegetation management strategy. Otherwise, it's just a buzzword slapped on a wish list for project approval. How can we trust that these interconnected plans will succeed in agrivoltaics when the author of the report is not present to answer questions and there's no enforceable accountability of following through? I urge you to reject this recommendation of approval. Demand an enforceable plan that integrates stormwater and vegetation management seamlessly, and add the appropriate oversight necessary to avoid costly failures down the road. Our community deserves this, and it deserves more than empty promises and abandoned plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, you're on up.
Yeah, there's nobody on the list. I'm not going to sign up, and I hope nobody else does, because your incessant attempts to control the public comment of subjects that are difficult for you is offensive. It is straight up offensive. And I really have a serious question about whether at the end of this, any of this public comment is going to matter. I'm not a farmer, I'm a city guy. I don't have a stake in this, but I can tell you that these people do, and I don't think they're going to be heard by you, Karen. I'm pretty sure of that, because you've been paid money to not hear them. And they've all made good points. But you guys have already decided, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be on the agenda, on the regular agenda there to approve. And it's just like when somebody comes up and makes a good point that you really don't have an answer for. You guys make some snide comment to staff trying to allude to how you've already handled that. That's inappropriate. You need to respect the public, and you need to respect their desires. It's their land out there that you're infringing upon. Look at me when I'm talking to you. I'm a member of the public, lady. I write your damn paycheck. You remember that? So do all these people here. They write your paycheck. I heard more than one time somebody say the word accountability. Imagine that. Imagine that. And your agrifloraics, whatever it is, and your stormwater drainage, the actual plants that are on the ground and your drainage are inextricably linked, and how you tried to separate those on the agenda is just stupidity. You can't separate those. Maybe that's why you're trying to make this decision, is because you don't understand those things. These farmers do. I grew up on a farm. I thought maybe you did, but maybe you didn't really do any of the work, right? You just went to school and did your cheerleading and then rah-rah. God, you're offensive, lady. You're just straight up offensive. How much time do I have left to remind her how offensive she is? I'll just wait until Sarah's done here. I got 1 minute. I got 1 minute to remind you how offensive you are toward the people out here. You won't be straight with them. Your little snide comments don't help. And your interruptions of the lady that was talking, inappropriate. You threw her off. You interrupted her public comment and she had things to say. These people make an effort to come in here and talk to you, and you interrupt them. Shut up for 3 minutes and listen. That's why you're in so many damn lawsuits, right, Patrick? You and the school board, you and the county. God damn.
I think that's all we have on the list. Do we have others who would like to speak?
Now I'm confused because Michael just basically gave a recap of somebody speaking here. He wasn't even speaking on the topic here. So the agenda item is a specific thing, and Michael is here saying he's giving a recap of you interrupting that one speaker. How is that germane to that item? There was one time I came in here on the solar wind, and I said to Patrick, I said, Patrick, as a giant pussy, how much research have you done on this solar wind project? And Karen, you stopped me and said that wasn't germane to the topic, the solar wind project. I asked a specific question about it, and you stopped me. That was after you had me arrested here earlier. And right now I'm talking about something that's not even related to this item at all. And you're just sitting there. I do not understand. I do not understand what your subjective interpretation of germane is. That's what's called, again, chilling speech. We saw a perfect example of that when that lady was up here speaking earlier. That's chilling speech to the point where she's like, I don't even know what you're allowing. Just imagine how many people are, I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm not even talking about the item right now. I don't understand why you're allowing this. You allowed Michael to do it. This is like off the rails. I should be arrested right now, shouldn't I? I don't understand this. You never answer my questions. I never get an explanation on this stuff. So I have to come in here and ask you like this every time and never get an answer. Never get an answer from your attorney. It's ridiculous. This is a specific agenda item, and I haven't even mentioned it one time. And so you interrupting that lady that was up here speaking is what is called a disruption of the meeting. A disruption of the meeting.
Do you have anything you'd like to say about stormwater?
All right, here we go.
Sorry,
All right.
agrivoltaics.
So it's stormwater now? All right, so wait, which one are we on?
Agrivoltaics.
Huh? So you don't even know which one we're on? All right, so now we're gonna get on track. No, actually, I don't have anything to say on it. Sorry.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on agrivoltaics? Come on up.
I'm Dorrance Little. I live at 1310 North 1941 Diagonal Road.
I'm sorry, can you say your name again?
Dorrance, D-O-R-A-N-C-E-L-A-T-T-L-E.
Thank you.
Someone signed up ahead of them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, because we're trying to go off the list. Josh Peters was signed up to speak next.
Josh can go first.
Is it okay? All right, thank you.
All right, just,
Okay, so anyway, as long as we're talking about being offended, the last time I was here, we got lectured on how much worse your property being taken for eminent domain is than having your property surrounded and made to live there with not having the option to have your property bought from you. So I kind of see the difference there. But getting back to the agrivoltaics, if you read this thing, on page 8, it says they're not going to use any of these plans. They don't have to. I mean, they're saying that they're only going to mow for one time or graze one time after the 3rd year. And there's no wills, there's no must, there's no shall. It's all non-obligatory language. So I don't know who's writing these rules, but they're not rules, they're suggestions. And I don't know who's doing it, but it's got to stop. This is the kind of crap that we're fighting in Washington right now. Wait until the last minute, ramming the crap through, and then we get stuck with something we have to live with for the rest of our lives, because we're not going to be able to sell our properties and move. We're going to be stuck there until we die. Our properties are going to be worthless. And then Evergy's going to come in and buy it up for pennies on the dollar, force us to move if we don't die there first. They're going to claim eminent domain as soon as they put a stick in the ground. They're going to say it's a utility now. They're going to claim eminent domain and they're going to squeeze us out. And that's going to be the end of it. And they're not going to leave. They've already bought up part of the property. They've got options to buy more of it, and they're not going to take that stuff out at the end of 25 years. It's just not going to happen. They've already said they're going to make plans to expand. Their second and third choices are all up and down the valley, and we're not going to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have someone next on the list?
Josh Peters.
Okay, thank you.
Josh Peters, 1431 North 1900. If the agrivoltaics plan for the Kansas Sky Solar Project fails, the inability to establish healthy, thriving vegetation will significantly impact the curve numbers. using the stormwater modeling. Healthy vegetation reduces runoff and improves infiltration, which lowers CN values. However, if the project defaults to frequent mechanical mowing due to vegetation failure, this will compact the soil, effectively raising the CN values above the model in the proposed conditions. Higher CN values would lead to an increased peak discharges and runoff volumes, overwhelming stormwater basins, and further downstream flooding and erosion risks. The difficulty of successfully implementing the agrivoltaics plan is compounded by the lack of proper installation methods and preparation. Establishing a resilient and functional vegetative cover requires thorough soil remediation, removal of residual herbicides, selection of site-specific seed mixes, and strategic irrigation, none of which are adequately outlined or enforced in the plan. Without these critical steps, the project will face challenges such as delayed growth, poor vegetation density, susceptibility to invasive species, all of which will undermine its effectiveness. Compounding this issue is the absence of enforceability, accountability, and mechanisms. Without a dedicated enforcement structure, there is no recourse to hold the developer responsible. If the agrivoltaics plan is abandoned, poorly executed, or underperforms, the lack of oversight not only increases risks for nearby residents and downstream ecosystems, but also creates a disconnect between the promises made during project approval and the actual on-the-ground outcomes.
Thank you. Do we have someone signed up next? Come on up.
Chelsea Hayden, I'm clerk of the Grant Township. The township sent a letter on December 11th asking for more time to look at both of the vegetation management plan and the stormwater plan. We outlined in there why. We have contacted an engineer. We spoke with him. Our engineer needs at least 30 days to be able to look at these plans. And so we've asked for that time. We only received a response back from Commissioner Kelly, who seemed to understand our concerns with needing to be able to have someone look at this, and offered 30 days before we could engage in conversation. It was presented that it would be on the agenda tonight. So we're here to lodge our objection to that for a variety of reasons. First, I would like to reiterate that the township is very concerned with Commissioner Willie voting on this specifically regarding the conflicts of interest that are known and those that are unknown that are explained more fully in the petition for the relief in this action. And then also, I think it's really, really important that everyone understand these two are actually connected. So we're doing all of this very piecemeal, but these are not piecemeal. Natalia was absolutely right. This agrivoltaics plan could affect the stormwater, which could then affect her property, could affect Chestnut Charlie's, Pines International. All of these are intertwined together because you're making assumptions based on modeling, and those assumptions can change the numbers that are in the stormwater plan. I do not know exactly what a CN number is or exactly how it affects stormwater, but what I do know is that it matters to the engineers, and that our engineer wants time to look at it and to look at the assumptions in the agrivoltaics plan and how it connects with and would affect the stormwater report that has been provided. So we would ask for more time to be able to do our due diligence. I think several members of Grant Township have explained how it can create a business problem for them, an economic affect their property both economically and the actual physical businesses that they're running. Both Chestnuts Charlie's and Pines International submitted letters to that effect. And then finally, I would just like to address the fact that there are no teeth in the agrivoltaics plan. And we are very concerned about that because we have recently seen exactly what that means. A few months ago, Free State Solar Project was here and Evergy was before you, having violated the CUP in that solar project and built a gravel road in that property for that CUP, and they got nothing but a little bit of an admonishment, and then able to go ahead and approval of a site plan to change the CUP for a gravel road that they had already built without permission. And so we're very concerned about your ability to enforce any of these plans. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else who would like to give public comment on this? Sarah, do we have anyone that has raised a hand online to give public comment? Oh, I'll get you just a sec. I'll turn to online if there's anyone there.
Folks online, if.
Do you mind if we do that
we want to go
first?
back and forth? It's going to be more awkward to go back and forth. So I guess I'd love to exhaust public comment in the room.
Okay, let's just
Thank you.
put another call in. If anyone wants to raise their hand online, we will turn to you very shortly. And if you would like to come on up and speak about the agrivoltaic plan.
I'll pick this up this time. I'm here about construction, right?
Name again.
My name is Cameron Sipe, yes. I'm here having to do with the construction, but I'm actually going to speak from the other part of the type of person I am. I'm a musician that needed insurance. We actually have friends in common, and I plan on being here on Fat Tuesday and marching down Mass Street and playing my trumpet. And I'm thankful to have good benefits that take care of me as well, because I know a lot of musicians that don't. I'm going to speak in metaphor really fast, and I will tie it back into agrivoltaics. Thank you. Symphonies take time. Symphonies are written by people that are studied how to write symphonies. This world is a symphony. The ground that we build on, the ground that we farm, the ground that makes the food that we feed our family and nourish our families with. If we rush a symphony, if you rush a group and take them to contests before they're ready to go, how are they going to perform? In this instance with agrivoltaics, you have people asking for you for time. They're not saying no, they're asking for time to practice. And I'm asking you, when we spoke on the phone, you told me that this is going to happen. This job is going to go through. I've reached out to Commissioner Reed multiple times through phone calls and emails and haven't had any discourse back. That's fine. And so I guess I'm going to appeal to you, Commissioner Kelly. I'm going to ask that you would understand that things take time, and that's what people are asking for. Agrivoltaics are an interesting thing. They really are. Let's not frown upon that. If it's not right, it's not right. So give people the proper time to understand if it's right.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room who'd like to give public comment on this, on the agrivoltaics plan? Come on up.
Diane Menzie. Oh.
Microphone.
Oh, this one. Sorry.
Thank you.
Diane Menzie, 509 North Street. I actually live right in front of Natalia's sheep farm. And I think if anybody knows anything about this, Natalia does, because she has been raising her sheep and doing everything as she can to be a good farmer for over 30 years. We've had many discussions in our North Lawrence Improvement Association, and Natalia is always there to give us any information that she can. So to have her interrupted because she wanted to talk about what is her livelihood and everything, I think that is totally wrong. I'm not a farmer, I'm just a gardener, but we're in the same boat because we all have things to improve when it comes to agriculture and farming. So I just want everyone to listen to the people that know what they're talking about and what they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room before we turn to online public comment?
I would like to be allowed, because of my disability, to complete what I tried to say, because I was interrupted and I was unable to get access to my brain back.
I would like to have that, if that is all right with my fellow commissioners. This is unusual for us to reopen another person, but I feel like I did take some of that time.
I did pause it, but you
did
I just
pause
want
it?
us to be, yeah, I paused
Okay.
it.
Commissioners, how do you feel about that? I know I'm opening a can of worms. This is asking for a accommodation.
In this circumstance, I'm comfortable with the accommodation requested.
I think I'm comfortable with it, but is there a time limit on how much more time you need, Natalia? 1 minute, 30 seconds?
I can't
Okay.
track time and access language at the same time unless there's visual numbers in front of me. Yeah, I will just keep it short.
Okay, can we do 1 minute and we'll have
I don't
Sarah
know
put-
what a minute is when words are coming out of my mouth.
Why don't you
This
go ahead
is,
and
my
begin?
brain doesn't work like other people's. I should not have to
Chair,
disclose
can
my
you provide-
disability.
Can you provide a verbal warning for Natalia?
How much, another 3 minutes? I just, tell me what you want me to do.
I just
Okay,
have a
so
couple
let-
sentences to
Go ahead.
say
Yes, please.
without distraction or interruption. The vegetation management plan does not commit to letting contracts as a result of the RFP. It says, if any contracts. That says that grazing management very well may not happen, but the grazing management plan, if implemented, calls for approximately 1,400 sheep. We do not have infrastructure in this county to handle 1,400 additional sheep. This will put existing meat producers, not just sheep producers, out of business as we are unable to access the veterinary care, the meat processing, the hay, and other inputs and services that we already are having trouble sourcing. The other important thing that is not included in the vegetation management plan is there is no provision for irrigation to establish the vegetative cover. We are focusing only on stormwater, but we also have to focus on drought because that's a very real possibility. And it was not possible to establish permanent vegetation on my farm this fall because we had such extended extra warm temperatures up in the 90s in October and like 35 days with almost no rain at all. Very strong drought.
Thank you.
So the plan needs that.
Thank you. I know we've had some people waiting online. Sarah, do we have some hands raised that we can call on?
I'm going to move GDK into the panel. GDK, you're in the panel. You can come off mute and you have 3 minutes to provide your public comment.
And if you can provide your name would be great.
Yeah, this is Greg Kessner. I'm at 1964 East 1500 Road. I spoke to you guys, I think I was actually in my tractor for the CUP plan discussions. I was one of the 100 or so folks that talked about to you then before that vote. I have basically the same concerns now that I had then, which is there's basically no way that anybody's going to enforce any of the proposal is really what this is that are in this plan. And I think, you know, I'm also an engineer. I've built a lot of contracts over the years, and you know, it's very clear looking at this is simply a placeholder for them with no real necessity or intention that they have to abide by it. So, you know, when we brought this up prior to the CUP discussion, they came back in and said, well, there's going to be a board that will administer it. And it sounds like that board is 100% advisory, and we're not even sure who's going to be on it. They can put public on it if they want to. So I would certainly, I mean, I'm guessing you guys already have your mind made up, which is unfortunate, but, there's obviously people that have taken a lot of time out of their day to come and give you feedback on this. Obviously the ideal situation is you would take a little more time and get some additional input, but I would significantly urge you to please not approve this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sarah, we have another.
I'm going to move Carrie Brandon into the panel. Carrie, you have to accept the promotion to panelist. Carrie, you're in the panel. You can come off mute and provide your public comment.
Good evening, Carrie Brandon, 450 East 2300 Road in Douglas County. I basically just want to reiterate again what I said back in April before the original vote was taken on the Kansas Sky Energy Center. And now, we're talking about agrivoltaics specifically, I understand, but disclosure of ex parte communications, conflicts of interest and bias. Guys, elected local government, state and federal can't operate like it's supposed to in a democracy without full transparency about self-serving interests. And Karen, total respect to you. I think you have a lot of really wonderful ideas and, really have good intentions. But this, to me, has so many red flags. And primarily because of my history with you specifically, Karen, in your relationship with Jacqueline Smith, with Kaw Valley Meats and the Central Grazing Company, and now most recently Kaw Valley Grazing and Agrivoltaics, which is the vegetation plan, which is all stemming from your relationship with, in my opinion, with Jacqueline Smith, which started with the ARPA fund grant when he first became commissioner back in September of 2022. So that was the first instance that I noticed where you were not divulging and being transparent about your grant writing. You did make an ex parte communication on the 6th or in June of 2023, but before that or after that in September when the ARPA funds funding list came back in front of you and Sarah presented it for a vote for changes, you did not divulge your relationship with Jacqueline Smith or her Kaw Valley Meats grant, which was in the amount, I believe, of $300,000 or something to that effect, $305,000. So then jump to the fact that, when we were working on, Kim Krenner-Ritchie was working on the open spaces plan and blah, blah, blah. There was a meeting in Baldwin where you stated, I can't believe it, but I've recently gotten into sheep farming. That also was a red flag for me because I knew all this agrivoltaic stuff, vegetation plan, Jacqueline Smith. And, so it went from Central Grazing, which on their website back in 2022, Jacqueline states, I'm assuming she wrote the article, that agrivoltaics is, renewable energy and regenerative agriculture that is very important for agrivoltaics to happen. Are we done? Okay,
That's our time.
Go so fast. Please just recuse yourself, Karen. I feel like you have way too much conflicts of interest going on with this stuff.
Thank you.
And that's for your best interest, seriously, with your lawsuits and everything.
Sarah, do we have anyone else with their hand raised online?
I don't have any other hands raised.
Okay, that will close public comment, bring it back to the commission. We've been going an hour and a half. Does anyone need a break? Okay, we will keep going. Commissioners, who would like to begin? I will address Having been asked to recuse on the advice of counsel, there's no reason to, so I am not. So is there anything else that you would like me to say about that?
Nope, I think that covers it.
All right, thank you. I did want to ask about the enforcement piece. This is something I had from my notes also. Mary, do you want to take that question? Like what enforcement mechanisms do we have for this?
Commissioner Willie, if I may, can I just add on to that question a little bit? I wonder, we didn't hear earlier from Tanya and Kim, who I believe were involved in some of the conversations, and Tanya Voigt being the Director of Zoning and Codes. I wondered if Tanya, you could at least speak to what your understanding and thought behind the review process that's been laid out, so that 12 to 24 month report and review back to the Board of County Commissioners, and then the Zoning and Code Director's 5-year review. Can you just talk a little bit about what that process might look like in examples of other CUP reviews that you would do, and how it compares, I suppose?
Yeah, Tanya Voigt, Zoning and Codes Director. So the first review will be 12 months after the certificate of completion, which means that construction is finished and that they're meeting all of the terms of the conditional use permit. So at that point, someone from our office, a designee or possible third party, or it could be me, would come forward with where we are currently with agrivoltaics, what's happening on the ground, any challenges that have been faced, any successes. That would also be coordinating with the board, the volunteer board, so they would maybe also be able to provide some feedback at that time. The next review would be at the 5-year mark. And again, we would be setting new goals, discussing future goals, determining what's been accomplished and what has not been accomplished. And I think that's where I am with that. So when we do typically reviews for other conditional use permits, which are definitely a little bit different than this one, most of our reviews are administrative reviews and they don't come back to the Board of County Commissioners. So typically when we're doing enforcement in the county, all we do is we look at the conditions that were set by the Board of County Commissioners. If we need to get expertise from others to determine if a condition's been met, such as soil sampling or groundwater monitoring, those types of things we send on to a professional. Once we have that information back from them, then we just check the box that the condition's been met. And then once all the conditions are met, the review is complete, we close it and wait for the next review. So this would be a little bit different, that these are coming back to the agrivoltaics plan specifically is coming back to the Board of County Commission. It would be my assumption. I'm looking at the conditions just like I do any other CUP, determining if the conditions have been met. And then if there's no actual condition, then we're just talking about the process and what's on the ground now and what we want to see.
Got it. Thank you, Tanya. No, that was a great answer, and thank you for getting my question, even though I fumbled through it a little bit. I hope, Commissioner Willie, you understood my tangential relation. I just wanted to draw out sort of what enforcement might look like for a CUP generally and what the difference or distinction about this is, but perhaps there are further questions you want to ask.
Might go back to Tanya on this. This is something that was learned from the Solar about the vegetation bond. Can you talk about that? Or would one of you like to?
Yeah, so that's a first time for us here at Douglas County. We had spoke with a solar farm in Colorado that had undergone quite a number of acres of solar, and we just wanted to talk to them to learn about lessons learned. And one of the things that they pointed out was how incredibly important it was to ask for a specific bond for vegetation management, and that's to ensure that the vegetation is reestablished and that it's successful, and then that bond would not be released until that's done. They will also have a SWIP requirement, which requires 70% to be vegetated, so we plan to mirror the vegetation bond with that. on the tail end, so currently decommissioning bonds mostly cover things that are happening at the end of the project or the end of the life. And so that's why we asked for a vegetation bond specifically, because the decommissioning bond wouldn't cover that beginning construction period.
So the vegetation bond, I think it's $1,100 per acre. How is that money held? How does that bond work?
So they would post bond with the clerk's office. That's how all of our bonds work. And then we release that bond once it's been met.
And that you mentioned the 70% vegetation. Can you talk about what that trigger?
Yeah, so that's mostly a state requirement with this Kansas Stormwater Pollution and Prevention Program. So they have specific standards that they follow at the state level before they'll release that SWIP. And so we just, in order to try to make sure that we're not holding it way longer than the state would be holding their permit, that we're coordinating together, we used technically kind of their information and their standards so that we would be on the same page and there wouldn't be long waiting periods between the two.
And remind me, what's the time frame that would trigger that bond if they had not complied with the vegetation amount? I'm sure I could dig in here and find it.
So if the vegetation is not met, the requirement, the bond would not be released, ever.
The county would then hire someone to
Oh,
that money.
yes, thank you for clarifying. Yes, so the county would actually either use our own resources and bill out our own resources or hire a separate contractor. We would use the money in the bond to do the vegetation ourselves.
And how did you come up with the dollar amount for that?
That was also based off of the Colorado bond information. We also did some negotiating back and forth as well and looked up seed numbers from the Public Works Office. So they establish any of the seed mixes and the cost of the seed mixes in the right-of-way. And so, and they do plant some native mixes. And so we were able to use the Public Works numbers for that.
I appreciate that, thank you, because that was something raised by the public, but also raised at the last time we saw this plan in April about how do we guarantee that there will be permanent vegetation established. Anybody have a follow-up on that, or I'll ask about the decommissioning bond. That piece has not yet been, is that still in the works, but can one of you talk about what generally that is? Because that's another question that was raised, is how do we hold them accountable for what happens at the end of the CUP?
I mean, I think Tanya can explain what a decommissioning bond is. It is not required to, it's not a condition that's required to come back to the commission for approval.
So the decommissioning plan does not require that to come back before you, but there is a condition that the bond amount you do have to approve. So the bond amount will come back to you. And that usually goes quite a bit through legal to determine that amount. We do have an example of a bond already set for solar, which is the Free State Solar Project. So we're just right now in communication. So the decommissioning essentially takes the cost of what it would be to take something out of production. So you remove everything from the site and you take it back to its original condition. And so that would be removing the panels, removing the posts, and then it actually subtracts out anything that they can resell. So it takes salvage value out of that. It also factors in landfill fees, transportation fees to take it to a landfill. And that, is itemized typically. And then they set the amount based on all of that. And that is something that, typically is approved through legal. We help with just making sure that the numbers look okay, but ultimately we want a professional to provide guidance on that decommissioning amount.
Thank you.
I do have one more question actually for you while you're up there, Tanya. Tanya and Mary. So I am just looking at the agrivoltaics plan right now and don't have the original resolution language in front of me, but there's specifically an update that was highlighted in this agrivoltaics plan update that specifies that a permanent vegetation must be established on all the land of the project area that is disturbed during construction. Would you say that is reflective of or almost identically mirrors the language in the conditions which were based on our regulations about vegetation management plans and the requirement to have all land vegetated? Is that, I suppose that's my belief and understanding of it. And so I'm just looking for an opportunity to confirm that, because I read that as, I was happy to see the language of must included in this agrivoltaics plan, and that it really compounds or double downs that regulatory authority that we already have, both in our regulations and explicitly in the resolution related to this.
Are you asking if
CUP.
that language matches the condition?
Yes.
I don't have the conditions with me, but I do know that the condition is that it'll be vegetated. And I remember we wrote it with natural grasses, forbs, and the intention is that it's not going to be gravelled. Gravel will be used to the minimum necessary. So that's where the access drives or where inverters are put, wherever they need it. Otherwise, it's to be vegetated. So that does mirror it, although the wording is not exactly the same, but the intent is what was in the conditions.
Thank you.
I have a question, maybe for Mary, maybe for Terrell. I'm going over the regulations as printed, and I read 4 shalls, only 4 shalls. The plan shall show where existing vegetation is removed and new vegetation will be planted. The plan shall include installation, establishment, and maintenance of ground cover and other vegetation to minimize erosion, maintain soil health, and accommodate the proposed agrivoltaic use. The plan shall include management methods and schedules noting how the vegetation will be managed on an annual basis, with particular attention to the establishment period of approximately 3 years. And the 4th shall is the plan shall identify types and location of intended agrivoltaic activities. If the facility is not designed to accommodate agrivoltaics, it should be stated in the plan. This is on our regulations, right? Am I correct, Mary? And those are the only 4 shalls as part of the agrivoltaics plan that have to be there, other than conditions that we added as part of the CUP. Am I correct? Therefore, if we added another condition at this point, we would put ourselves in some legal jeopardy, Terrell, by adding new things after the CUP has been approved. Is that correct?
That's correct. Adding a new condition would require a new process. Adding a substantial amendment or changing the conditional use permit as it exists would require us to go back through the public process again.
I'm just trying to filter out, we've heard some requests for certain things to happen at this point with the agrivoltaics plan. And I'm trying to figure out, if we follow those, do we put ourselves in some legal jeopardy because it's a new condition that wasn't included earlier on?
Well, I don't know that if you wanted to do that, we'd have to start over.
Thank you. That's what I understood. Okay.
Terrell, while we've got you, this is just this came up in public comment also about whether or not these plans, as just that are conditions under the CUP, whether they require a supermajority or not.
No, these are conditions of approval. The supermajority was required to pass the CUP permit, which we did last April.
Thank you. There also is a question of whether or not we read the comments and read the packet and read the reports, which I can say for my part, yes. Go ahead.
So if there are any other questions, anybody have more questions?
I do have
Go
a
ahead.
few more
Yeah.
questions. Okay, thank you. And it's about the board, that's the proposed board. because I'm just feeling like I need more information about that, about how that board would interact with these projects. So the RFP process would be, approved by the board. I know it's advisory only, but they would be part of that process and then part of selecting. You just talk to me about what the obligations of the board would be. That's probably an Ashton question.
I might actually defer to Brandon Sack with Evergy as the proposed operator.
Okay.
I'm Brandon Sack with Evergy. Good evening, thank you. Phase 3 is where the agrivoltaics really take shape, and the intent is for the Nature Conservancy really to handle most of that process. So when it comes to structure of the board, we wanted to make sure Douglas County was represented. We wanted to make sure the Nature Conservancy was represented, and we also wanted to make sure Evergy was represented as owner of the facility. And then it also allowed for room for other members of the public or someone Douglas County deemed appropriate to sit on the board. Really for them, the expertise lies with them, and we were going to allow them to shape it, inform it, and to really guide us into what the next steps would be and how it would work going forward when it comes to the RFP and administering it and making sure it gets out to the public. The Nature Conservancy has done this for a very long time, and they know a lot of people in the area, in the community, around the entire United States. So we're really leaning on that to get it, out to the public. And then also, they've been doing this in other areas of the country, so they do have some expertise to lean on to administer that as well. So really, we're leaning on them to show us how to do it.
Okay, thank you. I may also pivot to.
That answered the question?
Yes, thank you. And I will probably also pivot to Mary about how the conversations went about the board and the county's role and be able to name people to that board.
Commissioner, I was engaged in that as well as Tanya Voigt and Kim Kreiner-Ritchie. We were doing that earlier in the summer. Because of the timing on phase 3, we didn't feel it was appropriate to go ahead and establish bylaws for the group yet. This is, again, I want to reiterate, this is a plan that outlines a process. So we felt after the plan was approved and as the work continues, that the county will work collaboratively with the Nature Conservancy and Evergy to shape those bylaws and decide who should be on it, how many people we should have, what their goals and purposes should be. And while it's not, our hope is that we're talking to the commission frequently about that work and coming forward on those conversations. So I'd say if there's feedback the commission has that they want us to make sure we include, and the public as well, we are interested in getting it and working collaboratively to build that plan. I don't know if anyone from the Nature Conservancy wants to add anything.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, other thoughts or questions?
No questions.
And I know this comes with the recommendation of approval from staff, and I think this has already been asked by Commissioner Kelly of Terrell, but the shells that are outlined in the condition that we set forth with the CUP that was approved, does this plan meet those requirements?
Terrell's necessarily an expert on that condition, but I would say from a staff perspective, we feel the plan meets the conditions outlined.
I would just say staff recommends it, and staff has confirmed that it meets those requirements.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Reed. I have a few comments, and I'm otherwise ready to move forward with a motion. If there are no further questions or comments from other commissioners. So I think that many of the questions just raised by commissioners and sort of addressed for clarification based on some of the public comment we received affirms my belief that this plan meets the condition that we set forth in the approval of the CUP in April, and appreciate the fact that this is a plan for a process and that there is not yet an advisory board established, I think that that is a process that does deserve some more time and thoughtful consideration about what that might look like exactly, and the opportunity for public interest in that to shape some of those further, more detailed bylaws, grant processes, and whatnot. So I'm comfortable with the updates. I appreciate the highlighted updates and think that it does give some clarity from some of the questions that were lingering for me for April, and I'm comfortable that the vegetation bond in particular is a really critical stopgap that staff was thoughtful about developing and incorporating into the original CUP. And so that gives me even more comfort that this is a plan that is set up for as much success as possible, and that with all change, there is uncertainty, with all new things that have not yet been tried out here in the ways that are being proposed between the partners that are, sort of defined as of now and yet to be known and named, that there's always uncertainty, and therefore there's fear of what could come. But I think, in contrast to that I think that there's a lot of excitement also in this community about what might come of a successful agrivoltaics plan. And success looks like different things to different people based on what their experiences are and their values are. And so I think that will be a dynamic conversation that continues. Those are my comments about the agrivoltaics plan and my support for it in its current form, and staff's recommendation for approval. I also just want to address that, in a lot of the public comment that we heard this evening, and in much of the public comment that has been received in writing, published as part of our packet, or received later after the packet had been updated, is, in my opinion, it largely entails a lot of innuendo, accusations, beliefs, and strongly held opinions by some folks who we have heard from throughout this process. And I understand and feel the sense of loss and fear that comes along with these decisions that we are making as a board in response to this CUP application. But when I really parse through much of what has been relayed, I think that it is primarily fear-based innuendo and accusations and attempts to repeatedly suggest impropriety and unethical behavior, which at this point is being actively litigated and is a matter for the court entirely, in my opinion, and not a matter for this board to discuss. We have a process in progress, and we are moving forward with that process as items that we required to come back to us become available and come back to us with staff recommendations, which is our process at the county commission, is to receive staff recommendations related to land use and permitting issues, and as part of the quasi-judicial process, accept and receive their review and opinion, and weigh that as part of our decision making. And so I think that there is no reason that this process shouldn't continue for those reasons, and just wanted to state that that's my position about that, based on the topic of both items that we have tonight, and that I expect there might be similar commentary and perspective about that matter. If other commissioners have anything to say, otherwise I'm ready to make a motion.
Just a couple words. I was very glad to see the pre-construction cover crop coming in. That's something that I think is highly of value, especially as it then will pivot into the stormwater plan. I would also, there was a letter from the Food Policy Council, which I very much wish that they had been involved with this process over the last 3 years. I think they could have been really impactful in this, but the values stated within that letter, I think are values that I also uphold and would like to see, taken into the RFP process, and those in terms of valuing new and diverse farmers and farm opportunities and land access. I can refer you to the letter. I do also share some concerns with public about mowing heights and pollinating time, or pollinators and bloom times and such. But I also I very much value that we have a staff recommendation on this. I know there's been a lot of conversation between staff and the applicant that led up to that recommendation. I do wish I had seen more detail in it, but I recognize that there's a tension between what's available now, what will be available in the future. So, Commissioner, anything final?
I think in my question, I highlighted some of the restrictions that we have in the language in the regulations and the CUP. And while I understand those who would like to see something more robust, to Mr. Allman's point, and I share some of those thoughts as well, that I might want to. We have a certain set of regulations that were passed. We have a CUP that has been passed, and we have to follow that. I'm curious, in the idea here then that this is something that traditionally is an administrative approval, and bringing it back to the commission, I think provides some more weight to working with the applicant, so that when Tanya and Kim and Mary and staff are working with the applicant, they know if there's conflict, it's eventually going to come back to the commission. Well, I think that's good. I also think maybe it gives some, I'm not sure it's helping our community, to be honest, to come back and go over this again and again and again. April 13th was a really long day, and I heard a lot of the same themes uttered tonight that I heard on April 13th. And so I'm going to comment a little later about my communication with the township board. I'm going to wait on that one. But I want to say, I think every chance we have to look at it again, if we're looking at it as a way to stop it from happening, I think is going to create some legal challenges. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it and see, is there a way to make it better? And if that's the goal of this evening, I think that is a good goal. But to get rid of it altogether, I think it is a little hard for me to understand how we're going to navigate that. I don't want to go on and on in my comments. I could talk a lot, but Cameron, you referenced a music thing, so I'm going to go back to that. I took bands to contest for 12 years. I never got to change the date. They may not have been ready, but I told them, you're not a finished product at contest. The symphony is not over. And I don't believe this agrivoltaic plan is done and shipped and can't be adjusted after this point, just like my students weren't done being musicians on that day of contest. So while I appreciate the metaphor and the ask for more time, I think what I hope we understand as a community is that our desire to always have very definite answers that give us safety and security actually is really hard to do on challenges like this. That many times the challenges that we face are complex. We may not know all the answers. We may not know all the questions to ask. And by creating this plan, which in my mind gives us a chance to revisit and adjust as we go, as new challenges come up, as new conflicts come up, we have a way to address them. There are those who will say, I want somebody to be the hammer who will make them do what I want them to do. What I'm saying is, I don't think that's realistic. I think what we have to do is continue to work together and collaborate and cooperate and see if we can get better on this plan together. So do I have reservations about it? Of course I do. If you read it and you say it's perfect, then you didn't actually read it. but I think it's good enough for now and good enough for my vote.
One last quick point about the labor portion of it that was brought up. That could only have fallen under the CUP conversation. That cannot fall under, in my opinion, any agrivoltaic or stormwater conversation. So I think that isn't, because that part is already passed, I think that is an excellent conversation to bring to the state and to keep in front of, before decisions are made. I would have been glad to have known more about that and talked more about that, but that is not today's conversation. So Commissioner.
This is Commissioner Reed. I move to approve the revised agrivoltaics and vegetation management plan, subject to the revised corrections noted in attachment D by staff.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Does anyone need a break before we move into the stormwater study, item 3.2? Commissioners? Okay. This actually starts with Public Works. Is that correct? So Chad Voigt, do you want to lead us off?
Good evening, Commissioners. Chad Voigt, County Engineer. Earlier this month, the applicant submitted their final stormwater study, and I provided in my memo a summary of my findings on that study and a recommendation for approval. The drainage calcs that are in the study we really haven't moved the needle much from where we were in April, as far as it's really a discussion about runoff assumptions. And the outcome of the current calculations shows a 2% decrease in runoff for the 1,100 acre area. And so with that finding, it's essentially done. A lot of drainage studies, obviously for development, have to go much further. If you increase runoff, you have to start looking at what's the impact downstream. But if you are in fact decreasing runoff, then you've pretty much reached the end of the road on analysis. In particular, in this case, there are two locations where we are implementing detention. We're requiring that. And that is because locally there's an increase. And so while the 1,100 acres is reducing runoff 2%, there is a slight increase of 1% in a corner of one property. And to eliminate any impacts on the adjacent property, the applicant has shown detention in that area. So I can get into more details about what I've put in the memo, more details about my calculations. I did a parallel study to the applicant so that it assisted me with my review and also gave me some sense of some alternative sort of assumptions. And if other engineers look at this, they're going to go down that same path. So in the packet, there's one page where I looked at multiple scenarios of assumptions, kind of gives you a full range of outcomes. And I think that's kind of the guide to what anyone would find when they look at this. So with all of that said, I recommend approval of this study. It satisfies the zoning code that refers to solar projects. It satisfies the North Lawrence standard that we put in place for Maple Grove watershed. It satisfies the condition of approval that you established in April. And so I would say that, our recommendation for approval is consistent with those standards. And I think it'd be good at this point for the applicant to give their summary of their own study.
Mike Ivey is in the panel. I believe he's going to be presenting this. So Mike, you can come off mute and speak for the applicant.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Mike Ivey. I'm a senior development engineer here at Savion Energy. I'm here to provide a brief overview of the stormwater management report for the Kansas Sky Energy Center that is under discussion for tonight. I'm joined here tonight by representatives of Westwood, the engineering consultant that prepared this study. Here in person is Megan Drumsma, Water Resources Engineering Manager, and online, like myself, Seneca Stairs, the Water Resources Lead Engineer. To summarize, the project must manage stormwater to ensure the volume of water leaving the site does not exceed the current levels. We believe that's what it does. This involves storage and controlled release at discharge points around the site. The current report includes proposed retention ponds, vegetated conveyance swales, culverts, and a vegetative management plan to achieve the required results. Current assessments indicate that no improvements will be necessary to the public drainage system. In compliance with county code, we used specific modeling software. The United States Army Corps of Engineers Hydraulic Engineering Center Hydrologic Modeling System, or in short, HEC-HMS. In addition, we use storm event data from the NOAA Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or in short, NOAA Atlas 14, and the curve numbers that we talked about based on United States Department of Agriculture's National Resources Conservation Service Technical Release 55, or in short, TR 55. In addition, with conversations with the county engineer. The HEC-HMS software is a hydraulic modeling tool used to simulate how water moves through the landscape. It helps predict how rainfall will essentially turn into runoff by considering various factors like soil type, land cover, and precipitation. The software model models the flow of water through these ponds, culverts, through the terrain, through streams, and providing detailed information on the discharge volumes. The HEC-HMS model uses curve numbers based on the TR55 method and input from the county engineer. A composite curve number was established and assigned to each drainage area and is the key factor in predicting how much rainfall will become runoff. Curve number is determined by looking at different soil attributes, hydraulic soil groups, land cover, like agriculture, forest, etc., for each area. We then worked with the county engineer extensively to ensure the accuracy of these curve numbers for this project. Using HEC-HMS, Westwood then calculated the volume of runoff for different storm events across various drainage areas on site. They did this for the pre-development condition and the proposed development condition. These calcs determined the change in stormwater volume during these different storms, and specifically for the 100-year 24-hour storm. So to discuss the project's impact in these various drainage areas, I'd like to turn it over to Megan with Westwood to show some different slides. Thank you.
Give it to her instead. Full screen. I don't think it's sharing though. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. All right, Megan Drugsma. I'm with Westwood Professional Services. I'm a water resources engineering manager and worked on the stormwater management report for this project. I have a couple slides here just to kind of show the different areas that were analyzed for existing conditions, like Mike said, and then also for post-construction conditions to show that there is a decrease in runoff for each ultimate discharge location from the site. So the site in total is comprised of 7 ultimate discharge locations, and that's basically just where water will concentrate and leave the site. So the first ultimate discharge location is shown here with the big blue arrow. All this water from 1.1 and 1.2 naturally flows down to the discharge point at 1 there. And in existing conditions, it's row crop, and assume that for calculations. And then in post-construction conditions, there was a slight increase in runoff from this ultimate discharge location, which is why we added a basin. You can see in that hatched area. Added a basin to reduce those volumes back to existing conditions. So the blue table shows for each storm event there that we analyzed that there is a net reduction in volume for this total drainage area. Okay, and then we just kind of went through this for each ultimate discharge location. So this chunk of array and substation flows to the west. It's just comprised of one area, one drainage area, and there was a net reduction in volume without the use of a basin in this area. Three similar story here. Areas 3 and 4 discharged to ultimate discharge location 3. Those two areas combined reduce runoff volumes for the site. Sorry, it gets a little repetitive, but I want to run through each area. So drainage areas 5 and 6 go to ultimate discharge 4. So just a little bit to the east of 3 also shows a reduction in runoff volume. Ultimate discharge location 5 is a little bit bigger, so that includes 7A, 7B, and 8. And this area flows through all the proposed vegetation, leaves in the south, and has a reduction in volume. Ultimate discharge 6 includes 9A and 9B, goes to the south there, a reduction. And then the last area, ultimate discharge location 7, showed a slight increase, again, just like the other area. And so a basin was added in the southwest corner to mitigate that increase in runoff volume and have a reduction to existing conditions. So with those different scenarios, we show that the site as a whole has a reduction in volume to the neighboring properties and meets the requirements of the county. Great.
Okay, thank you. That comes back to the commission for questions.
I just had one question for you, Chad. In your memo, you stated you're recommending approval contingent upon further review and staff approval of the detailed construction plans of the 2 detention basins. Can you just give a little color to what that process you expect to look like down the road in terms of notification of that involvement in the process of those construction plans?
Yeah. So what you just saw there on the documents from the applicant, it showed hatched areas for detention basins. Those are just a schematic at this point. So I would want to verify in their final construction documents the actual contours and grading and the size of the outlet pipe, and then match that back to the calculations and make sure that it all makes sense. And that process can happen kind of as a part of the building permit process where everything is final for construction. And then even that extends to the construction period itself, where we would inspect it on site during construction and verify that it's built to comply with those drawings. So a conditional approval of this stormwater plan is probably appropriate because it doesn't assure an outcome unless we actually look at those plans and then the construction.
Got it. Thank you. And just to clarify, you said building permit, is that the same thing as, or did you mean a certificate of completion in this particular project?
No, there will be a building permit process to be able to start construction.
Okay.
And that goes for other things like the electrical issues with the solar project and construction plans showing the actual vegetated areas. I mean, they're working in, on all of these final plans in the background, and we're going to get to see those.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Another question for Chad. So we had a stormwater management plan in our packet in May, and is that right? And that did not comply with what you were looking for out of it. So you had some feedbacks and some suggestions on that. Can you talk about the process of how that conversation has changed between what was initially proposed by the applicant and what we have in front of us now?
You said May, I think, are you talking about the April?
How about April?
So going even further back, the initial stormwater study was November of 2023. And then there was a planning commission meeting a year ago today. And there was another version of the study for that. And then there was the April meeting that involved commentary on those previous studies, but not a new study. And the idea was that after the April meeting that we would develop the details and then figure all this out with these calculations. Since then, there have been several versions of this study that I've reviewed and provided feedback on, and the final version of this incorporates my comments. So it's been an evolving process. I guess I would say that, as I said earlier, all along the discussion focuses on these assumptions about runoff, and those have not changed substantially since about a year ago.
So the original plan, if I remember it right, and let me feel free to correct me, showed a 20% reduction in runoff. And that was, I think your feedback from that was that that was a little too generous and that they needed some other considerations. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the study a year ago was assuming meadow cover on basically the entire project, and that's probably not realistic. So given that we're in Maple Grove watershed, we wanted to be conservative with our assumptions, and I feel like I've pushed them pretty far into that realm. We're taking the NRCS numbers that we all know and love, and then we're pushing those harder to be conservative and increase runoff in the calculations. And then again, I looked at several different scenarios and kind of tested the sensitivity of that and feel like we're in a good place looking at it as a 2% reduction. I think it's a break even or a reduction. Best case scenario, they'll get good cover on all the ground out there, and we'll see even greater than 2% reduction in runoff.
So that the plan we have in front of us that predicts a possible 2% reduction from the existing condition in terms of runoff, do you feel like that's, you talked about using conservative numbers. Do you feel like that's kind of a worst case scenario or a middle of the road scenario? How would you characterize it?
I think it's not necessarily the absolute worst case scenario, but it's definitely leaning to that side of the spectrum in terms of the actual project plan. There are worst case scenarios that don't reflect what the plan is saying. So all row crop with impervious panels would be a worst case scenario. And in that case, we showed a slight increase in runoff, but it was still a very small increase. So with that knowledge, I think we're in a good place to assume that we're either breaking even or reducing runoff.
And I know that, so can you just briefly go over like the CN numbers, what they mean, as I know we'll have some questions about that.
The CN number is the curve number. It was established by the NRCS in the 1970s and then updated in the 1980s. It was originally an effort to control agricultural runoff and prevent another Dust Bowl situation. So this SCS, which is the predecessor to the NRCS, developed some groundbreaking calculation methods, and the curve number was the central key to that. In the 80s, they developed an expansion of that would allow it for use in urbanizing areas to do drainage studies, and all of us in the business have been using it ever since. It's stood the test of time. Those curve numbers are a very solid reference. They're well understood. They're readily available, and I put a copy in the packet at the back of the agenda item. And so what we did is we looked at those curve numbers, and then we're in a new topic with solar farms as far as what is the runoff from a panel, and is it impervious? No. Is it bare ground? No, it's something other. So in that effort, we looked at the research that was done by the Department of Energy. We looked at some other tools that are available, and then came up with adjustments for curve numbers that factor in those things and lean on the conservative side.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Chad, you're using a lot of words that I would think would make some members of the public nervous, like assumption and theoretical. Can you talk about how that's used in an engineering world? Is there exact knowns?
No, there really aren't. We have to look typically at a development that it's going to cause damage, and all of these approaches are set up to be able to mitigate those impacts in some way. And when we design a detention basin, we're just basically making it big enough to offset what we have assumed is the impact. And so here we're doing the same calculations and finding that the impact isn't there. And so I guess at a basic level, it's the same. It's, these assumptions are all we have to go on. Hydrology is, it's a fairly scientific, field, but it has a lot of unknowns, and you'll get different answers depending on who looks at it. Which is why I went into it the way I did with looking at a full range of scenarios of those assumptions to see how bad could it get, if it's all impervious, how bad is it? And it was good. I shared a spreadsheet that was behind all of that allows anyone in the public to put 3 numbers in and see the results. And, that's kind of informative.
I'm familiar, but maybe it would be helpful for others to hear other projects which you've used the same theoretical models and assumptions on, especially if they're in this area. Do you then go back and look at them again to see if it actually worked out the way the model was designed?
We haven't done anything else in this watershed that would follow that question. I think you're sort of alluding to the Sod Shop site plan, and that's a completely different kind of analysis and project. And it's a very small detention basin. So, I know of projects where we design large detention basins and we reduce flooding in neighborhoods. I think that more directly answers your question. Engineers can do that. And in this case, the same methods are being used.
And if an assumption or a theoretical model proves not to be accurate, is there nothing we can do about it? Or are there options?
I don't know that there's an answer to that question. We have to rely on the assumptions.
Okay.
I think the key there is that in any drainage study, if you use the same set of assumptions for the existing condition and the same set of assumptions for proposed, and you don't mix apples and oranges, then your results are valid. And so row crop has a curve number, and that's what we're looking at. If we were to look at, the impacts of this and not give a strong enough runoff coefficient to the developed case, but also not give a strong enough runoff coefficient to the cropland, we'd get the same answer. So you just have to have apples and apples in your analysis, and that's why I feel confident that we should approve this.
Thank you.
To have you reiterate, you said the way you've run the numbers, you find essentially no impact between the current runoff and the proposed runoff, plus or minus 2%, and then managing for that 2%.
Well, I would say that I see a reduction in runoff, which implies that our downstream impacts are not a concern.
You see a reduction in impact.
A reduction in runoff.
How's that impacted between, we've talked a little bit just in our previous item about getting the vegetation established. How do you account for that in your calculations and your thought process?
Right. And when I pushed back on some of the assumptions early on, and then we talked through establishing these curve numbers, we are using pasture in fair condition in the areas around the panels. Pasture in fair condition allows for the ground to not be great. It's, spotty cover, it's areas that get disturbed, it's areas that see vehicles. And so, that went into the thought process that this may not be a beautiful prairie, right? And even in the first few years when those natives have not taken hold and are not strong, even the ragweed and the sunflowers and all the other stuff that we're going to see coming up in that mix that we didn't really want in the first place, that stuff is still going to be vegetation that reduces runoff over bare ground. So my concerns, about establishing cover are that we get it seeded and that we make sure that it stays there. If they go out and spray and it's bare ground again, then we have issues.
Thank you for that. This is a public comment item. Do we have members? We have some that are signed up already, and then we'll call for more names after we've gotten those done in order. This is for comment on the stormwater study.
First speaker is Natalia Lother, and the second speaker is Ted Boyle.
Okay, thank you. You can come on up. If you, yeah, we can do Ted first.
Ted Boyle, North Lawrence Improvement, resident of North Lawrence, close to 80 years. And what I want to know is, what happened in 93, Chad? What happened in 1993? What happened? Where'd that water come from that flooded North Lawrence, 6 foot at the grocery store? Hell, it come from north, Grant Township. That's where it came from. And what about the water, the groundwater under the surface of the dirt, the aquifer, the water that runs underneath North Lawrence 2 foot a day to the bottom of the river? The Kaw River is a gaining river. And if you want to know
Ted,
how I know that kind of
Please
stuff,
direct your comment at the county commission.
well then what happened in 93 when North Lawrence flooded? All the way up to Johnny's. What happened? What happened to the statistics then? There was crops out there, but there wasn't no pumps. We got a levee that the federal government put in the late 60s. They did half a job. They put us in a levee all the way around us, but they didn't put the pumps in to pump the storm water off. But all studies that I see that have been done, I see no calculations on the aquifer, the groundwater that's under the surface that goes 50 feet deep to bedrock, sandy loam soil to the river, which is a gaining river. That means the water goes up under the river and the river sucks it downstream. Now, I hear all this crap Chad says, but that's not true. And all the studies that have been done, like the stormwater study of 05, it was 16 million was supposed to be spent in North Lawrence. 25 million was supposed to be spent in Grant Township before any development happened out there in that area. And then you take into consideration the Northeast Sector Plan that Grant Township and North Lawrence worked on 2 years to keep that land out there agricultural. The only way that you're getting these solar panels in there agricultural because you're going to put a bunch of grass-eating sheep out there, and that's it. So and I'm going to tell you, I've been to every business in North Lawrence. I've been president of North Lawrence Improvement Association for 25 years, and I get elected to this. Nobody else wants the damn job, but I'll take it because that gives me a chance to get in your face. And your PhD, that ain't nothing. Live 80 years and live through some floods and everything that happens in North Lawrence.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Who do we have next,
Chad,
Sarah?
you're full of it. No, man, you.
Trevor?
Actually, let me ask, Natalia, did you want to go second or do you want to just get back into the rotation? Okay. Trevor? Okay, Bierman, thank you.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Trevor Bierman. I've been a resident of North Lawrence going on 2 years now, so definitely don't have as much experience as Ted has, but I definitely have some concerns. I'm extremely fortunate to live in North Lawrence and be a part of this community that North Lawrence has cultivated. There are a lot of strong-willed neighbors that are very, very concerned about this stormwater plan and this solar project, and I'm one of them. I'm not necessarily against solar, but I am against essentially rushing this in because I believe there are a lot of things that need to be figured out that currently are not being done. Like Ted said, the groundwater is something that is very unique to North Lawrence that he has educated me on, as well as other things that come to being in North Lawrence, along with that pump that gets the water out of North Lawrence. And I do think it needs to be considered as a potential issue. Not only that, but I do think this needs a closer look because essentially with all the assumptions that have been talked about across the entire board of the engineering and assumptions with the runoff, is North Lawrence is not a place where you make assumptions when it comes to runoff and water. Because when it comes to runoff and water and the history of the flooding, you can have a lot of issues with that. And assumptions are extremely dangerous for the property and the residents of North Lawrence. In my opinion, I also think that with the North Lawrence Improvement Association, what has currently been considered, and over the course of this solar project coming to fruition, there was a lot of, the better word I'm trying to use here is Savion kind of ignored North Lawrence Improvement Association and decided not to engage in conversations with our organization due to the fact that they believed our minds were already made up and we didn't really involve our opinions in that of North Lawrence and the North Lawrence Improvement Association. So I do believe we have kind of been ignored in that regard. Other than that, I do think that the opportunity to have the new commissioners review this plan and review the stormwater plan is something that is very crucial for this plan to go forward. And in my opinion, it shouldn't go forward until that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Who do we have next?
I'm not going to be able to read that. Who wrote the red? Come on in, Josh. Josh and then Wayne White.
Oh, I had something written, but it's, now I'm going to change it. So in the CUP documents, they had a resolution 2414 in regards to the Grant Township public infrastructure. The report said, yeah, it's okay. I want to know and how the assumptions got to the point to where it's okay. I know I've done construction a long time. I know that you guys go by assumptions and it all works out on your paper. The field tells a different story. So what conditions does Grant Township have in regards to making sure that the ditches, the culverts, the roads, even in your discharge areas where I know they're pointed, there's a couple of them that are pretty sketchy. So these areas are not addressed in the documents. Who's going to be liable for, who's responsible for it? Who's doing that? Who's stamping that engineering? That's questions I've got. There's a lot of things in that stormwater plan in regards to Grant Township that doesn't make any sense. I get it. Models work. They're great for making you guys feel safe and warm and fuzzy. Things change. Rain changes. Climate changes. You know, you don't know what an impervious panel is yet. You don't know how the solar panels are going to affect that ground. We can go by the assumptions. I'm great, cool. But what happens when they don't do it? Who do we go to? Just questions that I have for Grant Township in regards to that, because the roads are out there, the soil is very alluvial, it's soft, especially down that area that they're going to put the panels. So these are all concerns. Other than that, I got nothing else, but thanks.
Thank you. And next was, did you say Wayne White?
My name is Wayne White, 3128 Ranger Drive in Deerfield neighborhood. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but after hearing some of the comments earlier, I feel compelled to have you hear a little bit different perspective. There's a global scientific consensus that the most urgent challenges facing our planet are climate change and the associated biodiversity loss. The Kansas Sky Energy Center will address both these existential crises by reducing carbon emissions and enhancing pollinator habitat and the ecological health of the land under the solar site. We've also heard from an expert that the runoff will be reduced, not increased, which I was a farmer for 35 years, anyone that's managed land knows that the worst runoff is on row crops, and corn and soybeans in particular. The conditional use permit was approved 8 months ago, and the opponents of the project are desperately seeking further delay. The careful and transparent deliberative process that you and the staff have followed has been misrepresented and unfairly attacked, with opponents even resorting to personal attacks on individual commissioners and staff. I'm sorry about that. No. I guess that we can expect such tactics in opposition to such a large and significant project. Accusations are easy. Evidence is more difficult. The gravity and urgency of the climate and biodiversity crisis is apparently of less concern to the opponents of this project than their concerns about soil loss and fear of flooding in North Lawrence. I empathize with those concerns, but I find them largely unsupported with evidence in this case. The native vegetation planted under and around the panels will result in much less runoff than the bare soil of row crops. The extensive water control and retention system detailed in the stormwater management plan will control any remaining runoff. And as we've heard, additional systems can be added later if needed. None of the concerns raised by opponents justify further delay. I'd like to follow up with a comment similar to your comment, Commissioner Kelly, about your students and their music. If we wait for advance assurance that perfection, we will not attempt anything new or difficult. Please vote to approve the plans and avoid further delay.
Thank you. Who do we have next, Sarah? If you want to give us a couple names to line up.
Wayne Williams, and then Nancy Thelman and Scott Thelman.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Before I address my comments, I'm sitting next to Natalia, and if it's okay, she said she could go after me, just to let you know. Sure. Okay. My name is Lane Williams. I'm a board member of the Caw Drainage District. I'm speaking tonight to follow up on 2 letters that we recently sent to the commission, requesting a reasonable amount of time for the Drainage District to hire its own engineer in order to do an independent evaluation of the stormwater management plan that's been produced and submitted tonight for consideration. As you probably know from the letter, we have a statutory purpose to encourage the improvement of natural water courses to protect lands from damage and injury by overflow and promote the public health, convenience, and welfare. We've been in existence since 1906. That is our charge, and this is within our charge, to make sure that whatever developments are in our district do no harm. We appreciate the work that's been done on the plans that's been submitted so far, but the purpose of our letter was to ask for a reasonable amount of time to conduct our own study. We've been in contact with an engineering firm that has expertise in stormwater management and have asked for a scope of work. The reason for our request is that because of the immense nature of this project, it's the largest ever in this area, that we want to be as confident as possible to provide as much information as possible for our purposes, but also for the commission and for our constituents, because that's our duty. We're not here to challenge the plan. We're here we want to review it. And if there are some suggestions that we have that could make it better, so be it. Or if there are some issues that we raise, then I think it's compelling for the commission to look at those. But we need the time to do it. And we're not asking for a substantial amount of time. We're only asking until February 15. We sent our first letter on November 22, following our monthly meeting on the 18th, which was the first meeting that we had following the information meeting that Savion provided to the public in North Lawrence. We didn't provide that letter before because there isn't any plan at that point. That was the first time we knew that a plan was coming, and so we asked for it. And the response we got was an angry response, angry phone call to our attorney from the county administrator. We're not trying to impede anything. We're just trying to do our job.
Thank you.
Okay.
I know.
Well, I just want to say the information in our letter substantiates what I'm saying. We just went until February the 15th because we can do it.
So our next speaker that's signed up, do you mind if Natalia goes first? Okay, Natalia, come on up.
Natalia Lowther, 1480 North 1700 Road. Please defer this decision for 60 days to allow Grant Township and Cod Drainage District to complete independent engineering reviews of the stormwater management plan and allow these professional reviews to be considered in making the decision that will affect the county for 25 years or more. I'm going to point out that it looks to me like the curve numbers are only valid. They're based on the full vegetation once that's established. There's several years before complete vegetation will be established, and the property owners in the area need to be protected from stormwater during that construction time when the land will be compacted more than it would be in row crops. And so it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we need to be protected for the whole term. The NOAA Atlas 14 values will almost certainly change in the coming years, reflecting increased extreme rainfall events due to climate change, which we are already seeing. Therefore, this plan needs to be reviewed and revised regularly, including additional stormwater management facilities, such as detention and retention facilities, to keep additional rainfall from leaving the site when that rainfall increases. So I would like to know if the basins will be designed so that their volume can be increased as needed during the 25 years if the NOAA 14 values change. And I think it's also really important, I mean, there's a bond on the vegetation establishment. What is the assurance to landowners around the project that they will be made whole if this plan fails to control stormwater? Will the county pay for my flooded pecan grove? Will Evergy pay for my flooded pecan grove? What about Chestnut Charlie's chestnut trees that are already suffering increased flooding, damage, and death? Who is going to make the existing landowners whole? And how will that be assured if this plan does not achieve the necessary ends? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Nancy Thellman, 1547 North 2000 Road. I leave any attempt for technical comment to other folks. Mine is more of a civic concern about stakeholder engagement. The City of Lawrence is certainly a stakeholder to this project. As the governing organization that citizens of Lawrence rely on for their health, safety, and welfare, these citizens deserve to know that their government has done its due diligence on this project. North Lawrence citizens in particular, as they are the ones who will bear the brunt of flooding should the presumptions of this plan be off even just a little. Isn't it better for the applicant and the county to take a proactive stance with the city rather than finding out too late the plan is not sufficient? Yet there's been no presentation to the City of Lawrence. It's a striking oversight at best, and at worst, it might be a sign that developers may not trust their project to fuller review. As one of the largest, most unique developments in our community's development history, I don't understand the lack of curiosity on the city's part, or the lack of collaboration on the county's part, or the lack of courage on the applicant's part to share a presentation. As with everything, the devil is in the details, and especially for a project that will be relying on a stormwater plan for which there is absolutely no room for error. Don't we want more eyes on this study, not less, especially when those same eyes will be looking to Lawrence taxpayers to pay for damages done to North Lawrence that might have been avoided? Similarly, I don't understand the posture of the planning staff and our airport when it comes to this project, which literally begins across the street from the airport's westernmost runway. It lies entirely within the airport's wildlife mitigation zone, an area you don't want to attract waterfowl to because of the risk of bird strikes. Federal funding depends on an airport's strict attention to this. Yet the Aviation Advisory Board has not had a presentation on this project as part of their due diligence. The staff report states they've received a presentation and have shared no concerns, but that's simply not true. Scott Wagner, the city's airport manager, confirms by email that his board has not received a presentation by the applicant or the county on this project. Again, if the devil is in the details, and if the airport's federal funding is at stake, and if the safety of those flying above this massive solar power plant is at stake, don't we want more eyes on this stormwater study, not less? And don't we want accuracy in staff's report when it comes to which stakeholders are fully informed and which stakeholders are in the dark?
Thank you. Who do we have next? Okay, come on up.
After that, Jeff Dennis and Paula True.
Dr. Scott Thelman, 1547 North 2000 Road. I'm saying doctor to distinguish from my son. I should have talked to my wife more because she said everything I was going to say. We didn't review notes ahead of time, but 1 year ago tonight, as Chad alluded to, we did receive a presentation at the Douglas County Planning Commission. At that time, representatives from Savion, I believe, had engineers that said this was going to reduce water runoff by 26%. How wrong they were. And I have trouble hearing this again, to have this same group say, yeah, we got it right this time. They had to go back to the drawing board. We then had obviously a long meeting in April. They didn't have a water plan ready at that time. Now, 2 weeks ago, we finally get a plan, and then we're saying, trust us. As Chad pointed out, there's a lot of assumptions in these plans. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to work through 100-page plans, but you've heard from the drainage district, we've heard from the township, we've heard from the North Lawrence residents how this is vitally important. We're just asking for a little bit more time. We're not saying they're good plans, we're not saying they're bad plans, we're just saying we don't know. And we can't always trust the experts. We couldn't trust them back in a year ago because they frankly made bad assumptions. If they're wrong, we are going to pay the price in North Lawrence and Grant Township. Nancy already alluded to the airport, which is under the city's management. as I understand, new standing water created within an airport zone does require a sign off from the FAA. I don't know if that's been done at this point, but it's a question you might ask. And then finally, I do have to note that every presenter that spoke regarding the previous plan spoke against it, and it seems to be almost going that way tonight. It does make me question the process, or even if it's worth our time to do this. And that's really disappointing to me, that we spend the time, that we plead with you just to give us more time, and then we're just told, appreciate your comments, and then seem to disregard everything we've said. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Who do we have next? Okay.
Got some slides to show. Okay. How do I get it to? Sorry, I'm not sure how to do that. No, ma'am.
Oh, okay. All right, you did. Can you help on time?
Can you show
Go
me?
back out.
I think you're gonna have to go down and out.
Yeah.
And then
You gotta go into the black screen.
I'll close that out.
Yeah.
Share.
And then pick that. And then share.
There you go.
And then you're live.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. How do I scroll through here?
You're gonna have to just use the mouse up and down. It's not a PowerPoint, it's really, the little bar on the side.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. My name is Jeff Dennis, 1992 East 1400 Road. I'm the farm manager for Pines International. We are a 500-acre organic farm right in the middle of this project. I'm here tonight to express my serious concern about how the proposed solar project will impact our farmland, the employees, and our community. Our farm borders the proposed development, and we already have flooding and stormwater issues. This spring, we lost an entire crop of our barley grass because of the county's current and slow sluggish drainage system, as previously described by Chad Voigt. These issues have been under study for years, but have not yet to be resolved. In July, stormwater overwhelmed ditches and covered 200 road, or 2000 road, sorry. That stormwater flooded Highway 24 near Shucks Implement. Our field could not drain and water backed up into the field, causing us economic loss. These weren't even major flood events. So this project without proper stormwater planning will only make problems worse. We have had less than 2 weeks to review the updated plans, and there are some major issues like increased runoff projections and drainage basins placed way too close to our property. Please see this right here. Basin number 10 is right in the corner of our property, and that is part of the increased water flow that Chad spoke about earlier. At no point since the Planning Commission meeting on December 18th, a year ago, has the applicant contacted us to discuss the installation of a drainage basin near our property line. If that drainage basin backs up into our field, we will lose our organic certification for 3 years. That's our livelihood. I'm not an engineer, and I have some real serious questions and concerns. We need to review and understand about this stormwater report. Given the long flooding history of the Kaw River Valley, we really need to get this one right. We all want what's best for our community and its future, but rushing this project only hurts us all. I respectfully ask for you to delay this vote and allow for a proper amount of time for review. I'll also show a few photos that were taken on July 1st. This is the highway 2440, right where the basin is going to go, right at the corner of my field. This is where the increased runoff is coming to. This is also in that same area.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not paying attention to our time. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I think we have Paulette, is that right? Okay, sorry, thank you.
My name is Stacy Wendland. I live at 1891 East 1418 Road. I also object to Commissioner Willie's participation due to documented conflicts of interest. I think it's time for this governing body to be reasonable. It was unreasonable to approve a CUP with a very unreliable partner, Evergy, who has demonstrated over and over again in these very meetings that they do what they want, when they want, the way they want in Douglas County. Their only observable consequence has been to endure a few moments of finger wagging from you. No meaningful repercussions ever. It is unreasonable that local land use and stormwater management plans and regulations have all been set aside to accommodate the desires of the applicant's project, and it seems the desires of this governing body. It is unreasonable for this governing body to ignore Grant Township, cod drainage, and numerous business owners and individuals' reasonable requests for more time to allow for an unbiased third-party review of these plans. It is unreasonable to develop plans over many months without host township input, and then require those who bear the most risk if the plan fails a mere 2 weeks to review these highly technical plans before a commission vote on those plans. 2 weeks is insufficient under any circumstance. An unbiased third-party review is reasonable and appropriate, and you, the governing body, of course, know this. It is unreasonable for this governing body to ignore the numerous expressions of concern and valid examples of lived experience that clearly conflict with the theories and desktop modeling in the applicant's plans. It is unreasonable to expect those most impacted by this project and who will incur most damage if the stormwater and agrivoltaics plans fail to simply trust you that they are valid and correct, given there is evidence in plain sight at the sod shop that past efforts to manage stormwater in Grant Township have failed. Additionally, anyone versed in modeling knows a model can be made to generate any outcome desired, obviously this highly desired one. It is unreasonable for the stormwater report to declare no preparatory work needs to be done on township ditches and other stormwater management infrastructure when no actual documentation of the existing structures has been done, and a simple drive through the township would clearly show this to be untrue. It is unreasonable to accept and approve an agrivoltaics plan that implies utopian outcomes, but is so general and so completely unenforceable that its failure is all but guaranteed, allowing the applicant to swiftly move along to doing what is obviously most operationally profitable, which is to mow and spray chemicals, a process that would significantly and negatively impact whatever stormwater management plan and road maintenance plan might be in place. It is therefore completely unreasonable for this governing body to move forward with an approval of these CUP-related items at this evening's meeting. It is instead time for this governing body to be reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Paulette Schwartz, trustee of Grant Township. I live at 1891 East 1418 Road, Lawrence, Kansas. First, I object to Commissioner Willie's participation in this meeting due to documented conflicts of interest. Second, the Township Board is unclear as to why these matters are being rushed forward for approval at this time. These enormously complex and detailed documents have profound implications for our township and the people who live there. They also affect a future road maintenance agreement with the applicant and are not written to be evaluated by laypersons such as the members of Grant Township Board. A third-party review by those with professional engineering qualifications is both necessary and appropriate to properly evaluate these plans. The stormwater report in particular has been over a year in the making, and yet we are provided barely 2 weeks to review it and even less time for the agrivoltaics plan. Multiple governmental bodies have expressed concern as a result of this artificially imposed extremely short review period and have asked for more time to review them. We, the township, are one such body. The only response to our December 11th, 24 letter of concern came from Patrick Kelly, thank you, acknowledging the challenges presented by the short review period and offering a possible 30-day extension. The stormwater management report does not meet the requirements of the county's Resolution 2414, the agrivoltaics plan, the success of which is critical to the assumptions described in the stormwater report, is extremely general and as a practical matter unenforceable, which will allow Evergy to manage the site as they choose in pretty short order. As a duly elected governing body, the Grant Township Board has statutory and fiduciary obligations to our taxpayers. This township is solely responsible for its public roads, ditches, and infrastructure. Why would the commission refuse us the time necessary to fulfill our responsibilities? If the county has confidence in these documents, why should a brief delay for a third-party review paid for by the applicant be problematic? Today, I ask for a deferral of a decision on these matters until the Grant Township Board has completed its due diligence with the help of a third-party professional, with funding provided through Resolution Number 2414, Section 2, Conditions of Approval. This third-party review would take approximately 30 days after payment for review has been made. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who else do we have, Sarah?
Good evening. My name is Emily Blodgett Panos, and I am the treasurer of the Grant Township Board. I took this position on the board because I'm concerned about our township, its governance, its roads, their proper maintenance and safety. But I'm a fiber artist. I'm a great fiber artist, but I am not an engineer. Neither I nor any of the other board members are qualified to judge stormwater reports or agrivoltaic reports to the degree that they should be assessed, especially for a project of this magnitude. This is a big project. This project is literally going to change the landscape of Grand Township, and therefore there are a lot of emotions about it. Our desire as a board is to seek third-party engineering advice and expertise. This could be seen as a lack of confidence in Douglas County, but I think looking at the long-term picture, we can all agree that the more care and deliberation taken at this stage to make sure that all the pieces are correctly in place and that we as concerned citizens and business owners feel confident about the conclusions in these reports can only benefit the project in the long run. Again, this is a big project. It's new for Douglas County, it's new for Grant Township. No one concerned has all of the answers on a project with so little precedence. Supporting each other with third-party advice is only going to strengthen the odds that no harm will be done. We ask for more time to obtain further expertise from outside experts, more patience on your part, and the understanding that this project cannot be rushed or undertaken lightly. We all want what's best for Douglas County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly, I recall a comment you made back in April about not wanting to, quote, screw up or make a mistake on a project of this magnitude. Commissioner Reed, your comment back in April that it's unquestionable that there are unknowns that will need to be addressed with this project stuck with me. And Commissioner Willie, you went as far back in April to say that this project is daunting. Your statements at that April meeting underscore the importance of proceeding thoughtfully and ensuring due diligence at every stage of this process. The Stormwater Management Report and Vegetative Management and Agrivoltaics plans, as presented, raise significant concerns. With the staff report noting that stormwater reduction of only 2%, the lack of a detailed grading plan to substantiate the data presented, and, as we heard earlier, a requirement to reach only 70% vegetative establishment before the vegetation bond is released, we cannot be assured of its success. Even minor miscalculations in runoff or issues with vegetation establishment and project management could lead to increased stormwater issues for the surrounding area, issues that would be costly for both property owners and local infrastructure. Furthermore, this report fails to meet a critical condition of Resolution 24-14, an analysis of public roadway culverts at discharge points. Without this analysis, there's no assessment of existing capacity or any necessary improvements to ensure runoff remains at pre-development levels. This submission not only violates the resolution's requirement, but also leaves Grant Township and North Lawrence property owners vulnerable to inundated consequences that could have been mitigated with a properly completed and vetted stormwater plan. It's clear that this plan leaves too much room for error. Additional time and resources are needed to ensure that this project is thoroughly vetted. A deferral tonight would allow for independent third-party reviews, greater input from non-participating property owners, and time for Grant Township, the Kaw Valley Drainage District, the Douglas County Food Policy Council, and the public to appropriately review these plans. This is essential to address any deficiencies or concerns with the submitted documents and build trust with its process. The applicant has had a year to the day to update their stormwater management plan, or report, I'm sorry, from the last time it was presented. And we just plain need more than 2 weeks to review it on our end. It's both reasonable and the right thing to do to prioritize careful and comprehensive evaluation of this plan over expediency. Approving this plan in its current form risks creating long-term challenges for our community, challenges that could be avoided with their deferral and time for further review. Back in April, Commissioner Kelly, you asked for grace and help from us, the public, throughout this process. Tonight, we're asking the same. Please consider deferring your decision tonight to allow time for the process and a thorough review and analysis of this project. Thank you.
Sarah, who else do we have up? Okay. I think we may have another. Come on up.
Thank you, Chelsea Hayden, Grant Township Clerk. I just wanted to address a couple of things. I really appreciate, Commissioner Kelly, your response back to us about the 30 days and your comment earlier about trying to make it better. And I just want to be very clear that that is what Grant Township is trying to do here tonight. Like, we are seeking time to get an engineer to look at these documents. We have been in contact with an engineer about we were already in contact with someone about a road use agreement. We have then reached out to them about the stormwater when we received it. It's only been a couple weeks. We haven't had an opportunity to go through it at the level that we feel like we need to as a township. And part of that is because the deficiency that Scotty just mentioned happens to be directly connected to Grant Township. So the resolution requires an analysis of public roadway culverts at all points of discharge crossing public roadways, and provide a review of existing capacity and the preliminary design for necessary replacements. And we haven't seen that, at least in the report that we have. I'm not saying that Chad does a great job. I'm not saying he doesn't have some information, but what we have in the report about drainage improvements simply just talks about proposed ditches and culverts being within the project and that they will be looked at later, basically. And what we need is the opportunity to have someone on behalf of Grant Township to look at the information that Chad looked at, to figure out where this information is, and if this analysis of all of the public roadways and culverts at the point of discharge hasn't been conducted, we want time to be able to have our engineer conduct that. So that's what we're asking for tonight. We're not trying to delay the project. We're trying to get time to have an engineer look at it, and the same as the Cobb Valley District is asking. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear about that. The other thing is that it is also important for us to have an engineer look at it because detention basins as a management tool in Grant Township have been tried and have failed. Will they fail in this project? I don't know, but I think it's worth having our engineer look at detention basins in Grant Township, ones that have been proposed, ones that are in place, the ones that the county has modified and asked for modification, and have an engineer look at those, see how they failed, and then be able to weigh in on this particular project. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to give public comment before we turn to online? And just make an announcement, if there's anyone online who would like to give public comment, to go ahead and do the raise your hand feature. Anyone here in public? Okay, we have one. Come on up.
Around a little bit. Catherine Ellsworth, Eudora, Kansas. One gap I see, and maybe it's in the report somewhere, but they didn't talk about it, is I was under the impression that there needed to be a separate SWP3 stormwater management pollution prevention plan as mandated by the federal government for during construction. Is that not a required? KDHE usually supervises something, any excavation that's over 1 acre. So my other concern is, I was reading back through the 2005 drainage study, and I'm wondering why none of those issues were addressed by the county. I don't think we'd be here tonight if if some of those suggestions had been initiated. Like, there's been times when you guys have been flush with cash, but there was a recommendation for purchasing land for ponding areas and beefing up the undersized culverts and the $11 million pumping station. And so I don't understand why a developer is trying to mitigate all the problems that have been created by the county's inaction on those points. And then one thing I want to add at the end is it really gets tiresome, speaking of innuendo, Commissioner Reed, that the commissioners constantly imply that any dissent is based on fear, ignorance, or malice. It's patronizing. And it would be a wonderful change of pace if the commissioners would not spend the end of every controversial meeting chastising members of the public for expressing their opinions and their delivery. Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to give public comment before we turn to online? Okay, Sarah, do we have any hands raised?
I'm going to move Annie Stevens into the panel. Annie, you need to accept the promotion to panelists to come into the panel. Not hearing back from Annie, so I'm just going to go ahead and move Michael Murray into the panel and come back to Annie. Okay. Annie declined to be promoted as a panelist. Michael Murray will be rejoining as a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'd just like to comment on the modeling used in the report. The software packages been developed over a long time and tested against a wide range of national data, different kinds of environments. And so I think that I think that should give us some confidence that these models are used in a very wide range of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to give Annie Stevens another chance?
Annie, if you would like to provide public comment, you need to accept the promotion to panelist. If not, can you lower your hand if you do not want to provide public comment? Not getting a response on either end.
Do we have anyone else with hands raised?
I see no other hands raised.
Okay. I wish we could have gotten that final one. Just one final call. Annie Stevens, if you...
She declined being promoted as panelist. I gave her another shot. She didn't respond.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
With that, we are closing public comment and bringing it back to the commission for questions and comments.
So there's a lot in the CUP about third-party reviews. My understanding was that third-party reviews are when we didn't have the staff on hand to review those. Is that correct?
I would say staff and staff capacity.
Staff capacity, thank you. But it wasn't to test staff's evaluation of plans. Is that correct?
Correct.
This wasn't a check your work situation. Okay. That's how I interpreted it, commissioners.
Chad, I want to have you address the 2414 standard and just talk through how it applies or doesn't apply for this scenario, and especially around roads.
Is 2414 the solar regs in the zoning code? Is that?
Okay, I was
14 is the resolution number.
the resolution for the drainage district.
Oh, you're talking about, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Willie, just
Okay.
yeah, to clarify, you're asking for some further comment about the analysis related to culverts and roadways? that some of the public comments mentioned. Is that accurate?
Kind of both, broadly and generally, how does that apply here? And then also a conversation about roads.
So the resolution mirrors what's in the solar regs. And that section is where a stormwater management plan has to be provided with supporting calculations. It talks about evaluating road culverts, that kind of thing. And so the comment about road culverts, in every case where this project drains to a public road culvert, runoff is reduced. And in the cases where we saw slight increases in runoff, those do not cross a public road. They drain onto adjacent neighboring property, which is why we're requiring the detention basins. And so that requirement has been met. You don't require any developer to analyze a public infrastructure system if they are not impacting that system.
So because the models are not showing a negative impact, then that doesn't trigger then that further analysis.
It's a calculation of existing runoff versus proposed. If the proposed runoff is lower than existing, then we would never require a developer to go looking downstream at the public system.
I'll probably come back to some of that, but can you talk about the SWPP, the Stormwater Prevention Permit, and where that falls? You've mentioned it already in your opening remarks.
Yeah, that's also in the solar regulations, and I'm sure in the resolution that they have to get a SWIP, it's SWP3, and that's a state of Kansas Department of Health and Environment requirement. Anytime you disturb more than 1 acre, you have to do that. Obviously, this project is doing that. They have to get a pollution prevention plan. It's going to have to show some erosion control. It's going to have to be show the revegetation. So in some ways, it duplicates all of these conversations about agrivoltaics and vegetation. And so and actually that's where the 70% coverage comes from too. The KDHE standards, when they say that a project is complete and they will accept that you've met the state requirement, it's that they've seen that it has 70% coverage.
And you factored that into your conversation around the CN numbers also, is that right?
That's right.
So your analysis, or I wouldn't say it's not your analysis, the analysis was done by the applicant, and then you checked the work and had conversations back and forth about how to establish some of those baseline CN numbers, correct?
That's correct.
So just reiterating that 70% vegetation number was already factored in to the findings in the report that there would not be negative impacts across the project.
I'm going to rephrase that.
Thank you.
We used pasture and fair condition in the areas where there would be vehicles to continue, accessing the site. In the areas that are buffers and wildlife corridors, those are going to be set aside. We assumed the final condition. So there's going to be an intermediate condition where it's being established where we have not achieved that. We have to look at what are you going to achieve? And, that's something we have to accept. And in that, we have to remember that we're coming from row crop, which is bare ground.
Next.
Terrell, I have a question for you. We heard some comments and received written public comment and letters from the Drainage District speaking about some statutory directives that they have. Can you just talk to us as the Board of County Commissioners a little bit about what your understanding of any additional statutory participation or authority from the Drainage District or any other governing body related to this decision might or might not be?
Yes, thank you. There's no legal requirement by either Caw Valley Drainage or Grant Township for them to have a separate review of the stormwater management plan. I read through, obviously that they're not my client, I'm not advising them, but I read through the statutes today regarding drainage districts, and I see no statutory requirement in there for them to review developments such as this prior to building. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. Sarah, this is a question for you, just on a broad sort of level, administratively, and as the county staff functions, what does it look like during these CUP processes for communication with a drainage district or township or other governing body that might be impacted by a CUP? Can you just talk about when and in what ways those sort of communications may have happened in this process?
That's a great Mary Miller question, but since we let her go home, and Tanya can correct me if I get this wrong, but townships and drainage districts are asked to review on the plans presented as a part of a conditional use permit process, and that process was done earlier this year.
So Commissioner, I actually did ask Mary Miller for that, and I have a series of emails from September 12th to December 14th, back and forth between Mary Miller as planner and the Caw Valley Drainage District, asking them if they had concerns or issues, or if they wanted to comment on the drainage study that was proposed at that time. And the answers were that it will let you know. And I don't have any, I don't have anything in there that says that they asked for a review, that they, and my understanding is that they did not at that time a year ago when the study came out, that there was no interest in Caw Valley having an independent review of their own.
I don't have, I can go back and try to
The
pull the original
Mary
CUP
question.
documents if you want, but.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you for that response, Sarah. I think, you know, I believe that, you know, based on my experience with CUP processes thus far as a commissioner, that during that initial CUP process is the time in which staff is planning, zoning and code staff, as they may be involved with whatever the application is making contact with those relevant governing bodies and seeking feedback at that time. We are at a different point in the process now, beyond approval of the CUP, where, as has been pointed out a few times tonight, we are doing a little bit of an atypical process of some items that we conditioned the applicant with coming back to us for further public review and public comment. And so, you know, I just wanted to clarify that that is the typical processes that feedback was sought previously. The third-party review, as was pointed out from previous questions and answered by staff, required by the CUP, is for the purposes of the county commission, of county staff and county commission to receive information and an expertise recommendation from staff related to the review from that third-party vendor that we selected. And so I have trust in that process. I think that it is proper. I think that there are additional layers to this process that we have implemented to ensure that there is public opportunity to review rather than just administrative review of these items, as might be typical in other CUP processes.
So just to react to that a little bit, I recognize that, you know, we're not expressing a need for a third-party review because we have an engineer on staff, and I, for one, am very pleased with his analysis and the process that went into it, and I asked him a lot of questions about that also. But I think we're hearing from these other organizations that they are requesting a third-party review. I think that they get to spend their money on that and ask for that. It's just that we did not hear from them before the CUP to build that in as a condition, and I'm very concerned about adding conditions to the conditional use permit that we didn't add at that time. That's the part that makes me uncomfortable.
This is a question for Sarah and possibly the applicant. A lot has been mentioned tonight about the timeline and when this is happening, and I just want I want to give the opportunity for the applicant to talk about what their timeline was getting up to this evening, and then what would be the impact, as some of the community has requested a delay on this or a deferral till later, what would be the impact on the project?
So Brianna Baca, I'm with Savion. I'm the development manager for this project, and I'll cover the process up until now, and Damon will take over the future. We started working with the county engineer and the county staff in May after the resolution was passed to work on curve numbers. We hired the third-party expert, Westwood, to work with us to ensure that this is accurate. And we've been working with them, and we've had multiple meetings with the county. I can't count how many. And then we had a public meeting November 20th as well, and invited members of the public to see the results of the proposed, we had a draft version at that time. So this is what we proposed so we could get input from the public. And then we finalized it after that meeting on December something or another. So shortly before it was published, though.
How many changes happened between the draft version that you shared and the current version?
Since last May.
No, I'm talking about since the public meeting where you presented a draft plan.
I don't think there were any major changes. I think it was probably 4, maybe.
Okay.
Some minor ones. Sorry.
Okay. And then going forward, what would happen?
Yeah, Damon Ray, project manager with Evergy. So the project is currently undergoing regulatory approval. And so we would not be able to start construction until that regulatory approval is received. But the current target date to complete the project is towards the end of 2026. And so with a year to 18-month construction timeline, that would back us up to the second half of 2025 to begin construction.
Can I insert a question there, Commissioner Kelly? I appreciate that question. Can you just expand on what regulatory approvals look like? What does that mean to you?
Yeah,
Is there more than one?
Evergy, as a regulated utility, must go through the Kansas Corporation Commission process to construct these generation assets. And so that process is underway.
Is it fair to say it also includes our regulatory approval process as it is ongoing?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly, if you want me to respond on our timeline in terms of the county.
Sure.
This item was posted publicly a week further in advance than we publish all of our agendas. It was published at the same time frame as we did for the conditional use permit in the advance of that. So we posted it an additional week early than we do our other items. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I just have one more question, I think. Grant Township and North Lawrence aren't the only place we experience flooding. Chad, how do we prioritize our capital improvement plans when it comes to flooding or culverts or those types of things? I mean, we're isolated right here in this discussion on Grant Township and North Lawrence, but I mean, we just a few weeks ago heard all about Washington Creek. Can you sort of talk to us about that process?
I can. And I think the implication there is that the county is somehow involved with Grant Township drainage and North Lawrence and the North Lawrence study, and that's not true. So the North Lawrence study was paid for by the city of Lawrence, and the implementation of that belongs to the city of Lawrence. And the reason for that is that this all drains to their pump station at Second and Maple in that area, the North Second pump station. So the North Lawrence plan was done in 2005, and we have to credit Ted Boyle for the existence of that. He came to a lot of meetings like this and made a lot of noise like he did tonight, and that's what caused the city at that time to pursue that plan. It was that week that I sat down and wrote the scope of the plan. I hired the engineer that wrote the plan, and then we worked together to finish the report. And the plan
Chad, that was when you were employed at the city. That is not.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. So when I was a city employee, we wrote that plan. And at that time, the whole focus of that plan was that we wanted to look at the comp plan as it was proposed and see what the impacts of that would be. And the results were that then the city turned around within a few years and amended the comp plan with the current Northeast Sector Plan to say, this all has to say agricultural. We can't develop the comp plan as it was proposed because it will flood the city. And so the $24 million that gets thrown around in 2005 dollars was to address flooding that would have been caused by full development of the comp plan at that time. If we take that off the map and say we're going to leave it agricultural, the $24 million is just kind of academic at that point. The $16 million refers to existing problems that were already there, and we saw pictures of those tonight, and we've heard, descriptions of those kind of problems tonight. That $16 million should be implemented, and the city has been working on very small pieces of that, but that is within the context of their entire city and all of the drainage problems, which sort of gets to your point that, this is not the only area with these issues. So circling back to what is the county responsible for? We have a few bridges, like 5 bridges that we built and maintain, and we've replaced a couple of those recently. And then we have one stretch of road, which is the county route that goes north from the highway. Other than that, the county has no infrastructure. The Board of County Commissioners does not own any other infrastructure north of the river. And so the full implementation of the proposed plan is something that the city should be looking at as far as addressing Grant Township roads and those issues. They need to continue to do that, and we're here to help them do that. But our CIP looks entirely at other things. It's looking at road and bridge. It's looking at a 400 square mile area, and it's really not focused on flooding anywhere. It's not focused on the issues that we're hearing about.
Yeah, the 2005 study that the city commissioned, that you also worked on because you were a city employee at that time, flooding issues in the city, North Lawrence and other parts of the city are not fully addressed under the current scenario. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. The stormwater utility was created in 1996, and they've finished maybe a third of the work that was identified at that time.
But that full development of the comp plan at that time and why it needed to be changed, was that residential or pavement, or you say full build out of the comp plan for North Lawrence or for Grant Township, that got pulled back significantly then, right?
Yes, that would have been Horizon 2020, and it showed a lot of commercial development up Highway 24. It showed commercial development at the airport beyond what's already there. It showed medium and low density residential over the entire rest of the watershed.
When a development comes in, is it expected to correct existing drainage problems, or is there a different standard? Is a development proposal and application supposed to come in and we tell them you need to fix the existing conditions?
Well, we as the county are not in that business. At the city, there's a standard for providing detention, and as an alternate, a developer could fix the downstream system. We don't really develop at that level of intensity, so we don't have county stormwater standards, and we shouldn't. We have a prescriptive standard for this watershed based on the conversations 4 years ago about one particular development. But that's small, and it doesn't rise to I think the level of your question that we're looking at the system downstream or something in development. I'll give you an example. The area at Clinton Parkway and Crossgate where there are, student apartments, it's down from, Alvamar, and it drains across Clinton Parkway. That whole area developed at one point, and instead of detention, they rebuilt the entire drainage. It was a cornfield. They put a massive drainage channel, and that's now part of the city's infrastructure. The developer paid for all of that construction to offset their development. So detention isn't always the answer, and building those pieces of infrastructure could be the answer. But at the county level, we're not reviewing developments of that scale. I mean, this is a large acreage, but it's not impervious surface. So there's a distinction there. At the county, we really don't go down that path.
So what we've asked for and what we're allowed to ask for is that it not increase runoff. It's not expecting to keep North Lawrence from ever flooding.
That's right. The CUP code language that we put in there for the solar regs is broad, and it says the county engineer will review it and make a recommendation, and it should not increase runoff. It makes those kind of broad statements. It doesn't have a prescriptive standard in there because we want the ability to look at a situation and apply the right standards and apply the right concepts. And so in a case where they're not increasing runoff, I think we're done. We've done the math. And on that, I'd like to add, there's a lot of talk about the model and not believing it and not understanding it. And I want to say it's a stretch to call this a model. This is just a spreadsheet, and it's math, and it's one equation, and it's a net balance of cropland does this, vegetated ground does this, it's this many acres, so here's the difference. It's very easy. I mean, this drainage study is simple in the scheme of things.
I think what I'm getting at is, we've heard people saying that North Lawrence and Grant Township has flooding issues. And one person asked, what caused that? And I think the answer we can come up with, at least one, is that it wasn't solar panels that caused the 93 flooding problems. There are existing flooding conditions in North Lawrence that this either developing or not developing a solar farm would not change that. Is that a fair statement?
This is flood-prone ground with sluggish drainage and little grade. All you have to do is go back to old aerial photos and see the scour marks from the 51 flood or, even before that. And so flooding is expected in these areas, and it's just wise to develop, the housing and anything that would be at risk with that knowledge.
Change just a tactic a little bit. So there was a suggestion that the city didn't know that this application was forward, or that somehow this happened under cover of darkness, that all of these public meetings were not known or by the city, and that if they had questions that they didn't have the opportunity. And just keep in mind that we have a shared city-county planning department and planning commission that is 5 members appointed by the city, 5 members appointed by the county, and all of those were healthy, long conversations that were held in the public. Commissioners, do you have other questions or thoughts? Commissioners, do you have
Ted, the
any?
time for public comment is over. Thank you. I do not have any questions or comments at this time.
There was a couple of mentions, Chad, of groundwater as an issue, or as a factor within that. Does that really factor in at all to the questions that we're looking at in terms of runoff?
It doesn't. I know there's groundwater out there, and there are certain situations where that's going to present problems for everybody. But how you cover the ground doesn't change what's under the ground.
It would be considered like a pre-existing condition that.
It would be just not related to a runoff calculation. Is it a concern? Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't have any further questions, but a few comments, but I want to make sure we're done with questions first.
Go ahead and start.
So I said earlier that I would talk about my communication with Grant Township, and I'm going to read what I wrote to Grant Township so you can hear what it says. I said, I understand that you would like to have more time to review the proposed plans. It didn't say, I'm going to propose more time, right? It just said, I understand your position. Then my question was, is 30 days adequate time based on the response from the engineer you are in contact with? A response back could have been yes or no. I received no response from the person I addressed this email to or any member of the Grant Township Board. The next the next piece that I heard about this email was in a filing to the district court. And it said that I was offering to delay the vote by 30 days. That is inaccurate. It's not true. And we can call it what it is. It's dishonest. That is not what I said. I asked if 30 days was enough. The next time I read about it was a letter that came today that acknowledged that Commissioner Kelly acknowledged the challenges presented by the extremely short time frame. It's not what I said. It's highly inaccurate. Offering for the possibility of a 30-day postponement. I made no such offer. I find it dishonest. I find it challenging when I'm trying to work with community members to resolve conflict, to find common space, when I don't get a response to a very basic question, and then it's used dishonestly in a legal document. This is my evidence for those of you who think I'm scolding you. I'm not scolding anybody. I'm saying I'm disappointed. There may have been an opportunity there to say, yes, 30 days would be helpful. And then I could have said, well, let me think about that. Let me come to the commission meeting. I can't change an agenda by myself. You all know how this system works. I would have to come to my colleagues and make a case for an additional extension. But when I asked Scotty for grace and I asked for help, this was not it. No response necessary. But what I'm saying is, these are the kind of things that make it hard for our community to work on hard things. Is that when we're disappointed in the outcome of something, we immediately run to a legal move, or we engage in a conversation that the communication is then used for a legal proceeding, rather than just a simple response to the email. So I am frustrated. I think we can do better as a community. I said that in April, and I'm saying it now. I'd like us to say, I'm disappointed in the outcome. I don't like what happened with the CUP. How can we work together to reduce flooding? How can we work together to make sure our roads have a high level of maintenance? How can we work together to have an agrivoltaic system that tells other communities how to do it, or even how not to do it, just to help them understand? But as I try to work with the community on this one, a simple question, it became a very difficult response. And I need to be honest about that and say why that was difficult for me as your commissioner. Because I do believe that sometimes I just have a question. That's it.
I'd like to say, I'm not
No.
disappointed in the outcome.
Nope.
I'm disappointed in your
We've had.
behavior and your attitude. Public comment is closed. Do you have any comments?
So I just the time for public comment has come to an end. Thank you. So, the only comments that I really want to add at this time on top of what I said related to this stormwater study and my confidence in our engineers' review of that and own calculations and recommendation. I have no reason not to be confident in that. What I also want to say is that it is not appropriate, in my opinion, given the totality of circumstances and the fact that many of those, most of the most vocal opponents to this project along the way, and that we've heard from in this past couple of weeks leading up to this meeting, are involved in active litigation against this board and this body. And so for that reason, it's my opinion based on my understanding of the law and my understanding of my role as a commissioner, that it is not appropriate for me to be responsive directly to anybody who is a plaintiff in a lawsuit against me, one of the defendants, to respond directly to them. I frankly don't think it's appropriate to receive correspondence directly from them rather than between their counsel and our counsel, given the litigation and the fact that instead of simple questions being asked, every piece of correspondence, specifically from Grant Township, has come with a laundry list of further accusations and assertions that are basically summarized in the litigation against us. So it is not appropriate for me to respond directly. It is appropriate for me to address concerns that I have heard from the public largely in this forum at this time with my fellow commissioners, because that's what Kansas Open Meetings Act requires of us, and that also because that's what I believe is appropriate when litigation is a part of the totality of circumstances that we are facing as we work through this process and work as a commission to be as comprehensive and collaborative and thoughtful as possible while minding our regulatory authority and due diligence and due process requirements and the rules that are that are demanded of us when we serve in a quasi-judicial role in particular. So just wanted to put that on the record, that is why I have not responded to many of the direct pieces of correspondence that I've received. And I will keep my responses and comments about the progression of this project to public forums such as this. Go ahead.
To take the temperature down a little bit, I would say that the request for these a variety of bodies to want to review things independently, I think if that had been received, over the course of the last year, I think that would have been, they would have had room and time for healthy conversations about what does that look like? When do we trust experts? When do we not trust experts? When do we go looking for other answers just because we don't like the answer we got? But working in that time frame, there's nothing under the county commission that says anybody can't do their own study. They just didn't ask us for time in the time when we were able to write that into the conditions of the CUP. So that's the part that I struggle with, is that I just don't think that that's a safe or appropriate place to be in terms of the process and doing due diligence on the application that's before us. That's all I have to say about that. Commissioners, do we have any forward motion?
This Commissioner Reed, I move to approve the submitted stormwater study for CUP-23-00312, Kansas Sky Energy Center, contingent upon staff review and approval of detailed construction plans for the proposed detention basins.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Commissioners, that concludes our regular agenda. It moves us to appointments and/or Commissioner Administrator Miscellaneous. Do you need a break before we move into that? Let's take a 5-minute break, and that brings us back at 9:17. Thank you. That brings us back to our meeting. Thank you all for the break. And I need to pull up what appointments we have in front of us.
Yeah, Commissioners, I thought, and my internet died, that we did have an appointment, but maybe I'll try to see if I can get that.
I did see we have a Kenwaka Township appointment for the Fair Board, and I'm afraid that's the first that had come on my radar. I need to do a little bit of work on that.
Yeah,
So
and please, can you copy us in on that? Because we have not received that.
no, I haven't received a name for it. It just,
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw that was on our list, and I just had not.
They will, the Fair Board will probably suggest someone too for Kenwaka.
Okay, I will watch
It
for
was
that.
Township Fire 2, Jamie 3. A reappointment of
Aguirre.
Jamie Aguirre.
Aguirre.
Aguirre,
Yep.
I'm going to get it wrong.
I
Okay.
have a high really have enjoyed Jamie's spot on the board. Is the first and only woman to serve on the Fire District 3 board. She brings a lot of expertise to it, and I'd be very glad to make that nomination if commissioners are ready.
Ready and happy to second that.
Okay, I will go ahead and say it then. I would move to reappoint Jamie Aguirre to the Willow Springs Fire District Number 3 Board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. We have a former member, I believe, of our board here. Okay, we've been sitting on processing the Bert Nash board appointment, and I think part of what's been in my head is that I think we'll have 2 appointments here shortly. Commissioners, have you had a chance to catch up with those applicants?
I had a phone call on Monday from one of those applicants, so I'm working to meet with that person.
Okay, so not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Pretty much the same answer. So a little bit more time, and I think to your point that there could be, is likely to be another appointment in the near future that we can discuss it in the new year again.
So I guess Sarah might correct me here. I believe that the second appointment that we anticipate maybe coming up is a joint city-county appointment, and I'm not sure how those typically work.
Well, there is no typical. I think if we have a candidate, we could suggest it to the city. If they have a candidate, sometimes they suggest it to us. And so I think if we have 2 folks that are interested and we decide we want to do that, we could certainly share that information. But that appointment isn't here yet. It is just anticipated.
Okay. Commissioners, any other appointments that you're ready to move forward on?
No.
Okay. With that, it brings us to Sarah, your weekly memo.
Thank you, Commissioners. My memo is attached. We do have a behavioral health court graduation tomorrow morning, and we're working on the RSVPs for the legislative breakfast, so let me know if folks are interested in attending that. Commissioners, this is our last meeting for 2024. We are not meeting on the 25th, and we're not going to meet on the 1st or the 8th. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. And I also, this is hopefully, with all fingers and toes crossed, our last meeting in the Public Works Training Room for 2024. Our anticipation is to be back into the hearing room. I would be remiss if I didn't publicly thank Public Works staff for their hospitality over this last 8-9 months for some very large meetings, some very big meetings, some very tough meetings. I want to thank sheriff's security staff, courts security staff that have been very flexible and adaptive to us as we've learned how to work in this new environment and the challenges that it presents. Most of us, I think all of us are looking forward to being back in the commission chambers in January. Commissioners, that's all I have.
Commissioners, do you have anything else for the end of 2024?
Great break, everybody.
Have a great holiday, everyone, and thank you all for all that you do to make sure that these meetings are able to process as they are. And you're right, Public Works has certainly put up with us as tenants here for a long time. We'll be glad to be moving back home. With that, we are adjourned. Happy holiday, everyone.